All right. It is 6:35. We are going to call to open at 6:35. As a quick note before we continue, I see that 6 of you are in the progress of answering the poll. Please be sure to click submit so that we can record those results appropriately. Further, I'll be showing the items on the screen as we go along. And raise your hand if you have any questions or comments at any time. So, we will enter the call to open at 6:35 p.m. Attendance will be taken with this form that I've sent to all of you. And we will now move into reports. Reports will not be given verbally. Reports are all on this PowerPoint found in the folder sent to you all, and you can read them at your leisure and ask any questions of any of the people involved. This speeds up the process while providing the information to all of you in a very accessible way. So we will move through reports into voting items. We will begin with the approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion on the approval of our previous week's minutes? I will allow about a moment for anyone to raise their hand or express a concern. Seeing no points of discussion on the approval of the minutes, I would like to approve the previous week's minutes by unanimous consent. Is there any opposition to moving this by unanimous consent? If so, please unmute yourself and say so, or raise your hand at this point. Seeing no opposition, it is so moved. Now on to our second voting item. The second voting item is the confirmation of a deputy speaker. I have spent the past while since I've become speaker looking for a deputy speaker. And over the course of the past week, I interviewed a couple of very good applicants. It was a very difficult decision to make, but I've chosen to nominate Irene as my deputy speaker. Irene, do you accept the nomination?
I do accept. Thank you, Luis.
Wonderful. Thank you for accepting. This has to be passed by a 2/3 majority vote for those who do not know. Is there any discussion on this nomination before I move forward? I will actually begin the discussion. I think that Irene is a wonderful candidate for deputy speaker. I spent a lot more time considering this than I thought I did because I just had two really great options, and I'm sure she will do well in this office. And I really hope you all feel the same. So thank you all for considering. I'll go to Noah Frank next to speak.
Sure, just a couple of words of support. Irene, you're great. Irene and I have had a number of conversations on everything from bringing job materials to the surrounding community, of course to our project down with that kitchen in Yale. Irene is so passionate about human rights, which is just awesome, and I cannot wait to work with you as deputy speaker. And yeah, she's great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Noah, for those words of support. Are there any other speakers at this time? Christine.
Yeah, I'll gladly speak upon Irene, just a little more words of encouragement. But in student development, she really hit the ball rolling and just really picked up on things, no matter how new, no matter how like outwardly the ideas were, she's always ready with an idea, just supporting students and just really advocating for all of us out there. So she's amazing, and I can't wait to see what she accomplishes as deputy.
Thank you for that. Neha, I see your hand is raised, and I think we'll cap debate here and move into unanimous consent or vote.
I just came in, so sorry about that. But Irene is such a lovely lady. Such a pleasure to be working with her already. I remember the first time I met her, she was one of the most empowering women I've ever met at that time. And there's a lot of women, but to empower other women around you is just such a strong quality that she has. And I'm so excited to work with her and feel empowered in this workspace, which could be difficult sometimes, but I know she's going to be huge in that. Not just advocacy with work, but just in her personal life. She's great at doing so.
Thank you, Neha. With that, I would like to move to confirm Irene as the deputy speaker by unanimous consent. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, congratulations, Irene, on becoming the Deputy Speaker at 6:40 p.m. So we will now move into the next point on the agenda, which is an amendment to the Student Body Senate Standing Rules. This was authored by myself and Senator Sarah Hill. She brought this idea to me, and as Speaker, it is my job to maintain these standing rules. So I wanted to help her make sure that it was done well, and I think that we came to a wonderful place. And with that, I will allow her to introduce this amendment.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I got the idea for the point of diversity in our last Senate, where discussion on the Mental Care Act got sidetracked and became uninclusive or not as aware of issues as diversity as it should have been. In my mind, this point ensures the Chief Diversity Officer has the power in Senate that should come with the position. The goal here is still for Senate to try to be an inclusive place where everyone's opinions are valued. So the goal, in my mind, is not to need to use this point. However, when Senate does become uninclusive and something we don't want or intend to happen occurs, this would help us address it in the exact moment and allow the CDO to help us understand the issue and how we can correct it and go back to discussion on the line item and effectively use our time. In my mind, it just makes sense to have this. With this point, anyone can make it by simply unmuting and saying point of diversity after someone finishes talking or before another person starts. So like you don't need to wait with your hand raised. And that's all I have to say on it right now, because to me it makes sense. But if there are any questions, I will do my very best to answer.
Yeah, what happens once the point is called? What's the Chief Diversity Officer's role?
So thank you for that question, Ben. After the point is called, the Speaker will determine whether or not the point is valid. And should the Speaker deem that the point is valid, he will yield to the Chief Diversity Officer to make whatever statement he pleases. So in essence, this is yielding to the Chief Diversity Officer through a formalized practice, in a way that can be made by anyone at any time. So this is just allowing the Chief Diversity Officer to speak on a particular subject. Please, in the future, raise your hand if you would like to express a point of discussion or ask a question. Braden, is this Braden? Feel free to go.
So I just have a quick question. Last week, when we were talking about that bill, we ended up moving it to the Diversity Committee. This is different than that, right?
Yes, Braden. This is an entirely different piece of legislation. We will be considering the Mental Care Act later in this meeting.
No, I meant like this rule, it doesn't send it to that committee.
No.
Okay.
That's a very different thing. That is tabling to a committee. This is just asking the Chief Diversity Officer to speak on a given subject.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Neha, is your hand up from before, or is that for now? Okay, Lakita.
So I just have a question, like in the event that the CDO isn't at the meeting, and I don't expect this, but if there is, then who would it defer to if there's a point of diversity raised or that motion is made?
That is a very good question. I would say that it would it in essence could not be made. It would kind of be brought up by the Chief Diversity Officer at his next appearance, I would imagine. Or it would be brought up at the Diversity and Outreach Commission meeting, I presume. I can't speak to that for sure. Perhaps the Chief Diversity Officer would like to speak to it. President Hernandez.
All right. Thank you for recognizing me. I just have a few concerns about the addition of this provision, because I think that while we are in a moderated space already, our speech is already moderated, and folks can yield their time to somebody else, and the Chief Diversity Officer already has speaking privileges in Senate. So I'm wondering why we need to add this extra provision to regulate speech more when we can empower people like we already do. We already give them speaking rights, and the CDO can chime in whenever they feel like it's appropriate. So that was just my question about the provision.
So I will speak to that more immediately. Essentially, what this will do is it will make it known that the chief diversity officer's input is wanted on something, so that I will be aware of it and I can yield to them. Because I feel like on these issues it's important. I'll go to Sarah Hill to kind of finish answering or making that statement if she would like.
Basically agreeing with everything you just said. I think it's important for us in Senate to be aware of the fact that the speaker cannot always be on top of every single issue. And personally, I think if we have the role of the chief diversity officer, we should really recognize that role by allowing us to have it be an effective participation, like in discussion. I don't know if that answers that, but.
Thank you, Sarah. We will now go to Katie.
Okay, I will make this quick, but I just want to say that I'm super proud of you, Sarah, for acting so quickly on this. I think that in the past, USG has gotten a lot of criticism for being reactive and not proactive in the way that we respond when our spaces become unsafe for everyone. And so I think that this is, the mark of a transition between being more reactive to being proactive and immediately responding to these types of scenarios and situations. So I just wanted to commend you on that and say that I'm proud of you. So.
Barring any motions to amend, I'm going to cap the speakers at those who currently have their hands raised. So we will have 3 more speakers at this time, starting with Eduardo.
Okay. Hi, Luis. Hi, Sarah. Nice hearing you. So I have a question regards our parliamentary procedure as a whole. In that, what's the difference between this sort of point and a point of order or a point of information when this sort of issue is raised during debate?
So functionally, the way that I see the difference is a point of order or such would be directed to either the speaker or the chief justice. I see this serving as in a similar capacity for points on diversity and inclusion towards the appropriate officer. So I see a point of order going to the people who are in charge of procedure. I see this as going to the person in the organization who is in charge of this particular topic. So it serves the same purpose, I will admit, but it is for a slightly different goal, if that makes sense. Neha.
I would love to just up arrow everything Katie said. Sarah, this is amazing. You are such an idea person and such a doer, and having both in one person is so rare, but that's who you are. You had an idea and then you made a legislation. Both are so tough to do by itself. So this is amazing. I remember reading it over and talking about the idea with Luis, and I was like, oh my goodness, Sarah's a genius. So thank you for that. But about why this is needed, Senate is very open to freedom of speech and all those amazing things that we do here. This is just providing a safe place for marginalized groups. So we can always have that freedom of speech. All this is doing is saying if you feel like you are being attacked or you're uncomfortable or something that's personal to you and it's affecting you and it has to do with, your identity, whatever that is, you can say it's a point of diversity. If something is getting uninclusive, this is just to kind of revamp, this is an inclusive environment. Let's just not discuss this, or let's discuss it in this way. That's all it is. We want to be as inclusive as we can, hear all sides, but make sure that we're not being inclusive at the cost of making BIPOC students feel uncomfortable. So we're supposed to make everyone feel uncomfortable, and that means every single student. And this is all that's doing. It's just giving a safe place for students who are marginalized and didn't have that safe place before.
So we'll go to Chris, and then I'd like to move into a vote on this matter. As I said, I would cap debate at that point. So we will be going with that plan. Chris, feel free to speak.
Hi, I was just wondering if this point of order could be used to interrupt someone while they're speaking, sort of like a point of order, or can it only be used after someone's done saying what they were thinking?
The intention is that it would be used after, so not to just interrupt someone.
I will not be accepting any in the middle of another person's speech. With that, we will move into a vote on this piece of legislation. I hope to do this by unanimous consent, but I understand if there is opposition to it, as it did have speakers for and against. So I move to pass this by unanimous consent. If there are any objections, please say so now. I didn't see.
I would object to passing that by consent.
Okay. You're not a voting member though, so I don't know how that works.
I'll object for him.
Okay, wonderful. So we will now move into a vote. This will slow things down a little bit. So let me set up the vote. Edit questions. Standing rules. For, against. All right. I am opening the poll. Please only vote in this poll if you are a voting member of the Student Senate. The poll will be open for 5 minutes. At the end of that, this will be enacted or not.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
You forgot to put an abstain option.
That is a very good point. I will close the poll and reopen it. Thank you for pointing that out, Eduardo. I suppose not voting would just be abstaining. No, never mind. I'll do it the right way. Sorry, it takes a moment to open and close this poll. So let me edit the question. No. I am reopening the poll with the proper answers at this point. So please feel free to click any of those three. And please only vote in this if you are a senator. In the future, I will provide a non-senator option as to not mess up the numbers. I should have thought of that this time. My bad. So we will. This is rather important to the remaining functioning of the committee of Senate. So we'll wait until there's a clear winner in this poll to move on. I don't see whose hand just went up. Could whoever it was say so? Was that you, Lakita?
Yeah, it was. I was just gonna say, can I just make? I don't know if it's a motion or a point of order, but for the rest of the legislation that comes in for today's meeting, can we just have voting rather than like either someone objecting to unanimous consent?
So I'm personally more in favor of doing the unanimous consent when it's going to be a unanimous vote. We can. It will slow down the meeting by 5 minutes at the end of every piece of legislation. That is kind of the statement I will make on that.
Yeah, that's fine then. Never mind.
Okay. If there ever is an objection, though, do not oppose it on the grounds that it will take 5 more minutes. It's more important that we have our true opinions than saving time. I think I saw Ben's hand go up, but I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, is there a reason that it has to be 5 minutes? Like, why can't we make it 2 or 3?
There may be a way to move it, but I don't know how to do it. I will take a look. I will take a look before I send out the next poll. I'm going to call it here because more than 50% of all the participants in the room have voted for. So with this, the amendment to the Student Body Senate standing rules have passed in a vote of 26 to 5 to 4. We will now move into the joint resolution regarding the 2020 presidential election. I will now I'll yield to Director Frank to introduce this legislation.
Sure. Thank you, Luis. Thanks everybody for being here. So this is a piece of legislation that the External Affairs Committee put together. It passed in committee yesterday unanimously. This is a long and proud tradition of USG in which we compile the results of the elections. We congratulate the winners, and on behalf of students all over the University of Connecticut, we demonstrate and maintain our commitment to working with them on the many difficult issues that we're going to be talking about in this upcoming 2021 session. Now, of course, things are going to look different. We don't know if the legislative agenda is going to be carried out in person or online, but whatever the challenge is, we are ready for it. And a part of that is acknowledging success where success is had. Largely what this legislation focuses on, though, what I wanted to do on top of congratulating the winners, I also want to recognize the plentitude of hard work that went into doing so much of what USG, PERG, and so many groups around campus did. On top of the External Affairs Committee and the New Voters Project having an official partnership, with the help of President Hernandez, as well as our lovely Dean of Students and our friends over at PERG, we were able to put on an election night watch party. It was a huge success. It was on Channel 3 News for people who didn't know, so a little bit of free publicity for us. But on top of that, it was such an honor and such a privilege to work on behalf of the #UConnVotes initiative. Registering students, putting students in contact with relevant officials, and I want to see the university come together and coalesce around other bigger ideas just like this. So with this legislation, Louise, if you could scroll down, please. The aim is to not only congratulate and thank the hard work of the many people that helped put all of this together. I also think it's incredibly important that we understanding that #UConnVotes turned into an entire UConn dedicated website all over the story. Why don't we see more student initiatives utilizing that platform? And I think that's that's definitely a question that we can address over the course of this year. We have so many great things on the agenda tonight, and I would love for the university administration and community to help rally around students much more than they are currently doing. With that, I would like to thank everybody who helped put this together, whether it was voting or the bill itself, and thank the administration that did help us. It was greatly appreciated. And yeah, thank you so much for a great turnout, and I'll yield to any questions if people have
them. Ben Gladstone.
It hasn't been confirmed who won the election yet. There's still ongoing lawsuits and recounts.
Right. There still are ongoing lawsuits, but for right now, we are projecting that Joe Biden's the winner. And if statistical analysis is correct, the electoral votes are already in, regardless of where the lawsuits are going down. In Georgia, Pennsylvania has already been called, and the margin of error for fraudulent ballots at this point has been confirmed to not be enough to sway the presidential election in one direction or another. So we're just following in the footsteps of a number of organizations that are congratulating the 46th president. That was my only intention by doing that. I understand there are some things pending, but moving forward with this consensus, I feel like is the best course of action.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Noah? Seeing no questions, are there any points of discussion on this legislation? As a quick procedural note, I did find how to lower the time, so now all of our votes will be 2 minutes rather than 5. So that's nice.
There you go.
With no questions and no points of discussion, I'm going to move to forward this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to doing so? Ben?
I object.
Ben objects to doing it by unanimous consent, so I shall open the poll. The poll is open. You all have 2 minutes. Please only vote for, against, or abstain if you are a sitting senator in USG. Click the not a senator option if you are not a senator in USG. Thank you very much. We will move on in 1 minute and 45 seconds. I will allow everyone to finish making their vote, but seeing as more than half of the lobby has voted in favor, we will be moving on from this. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Noah. We will now be moving into the Mental Care Act. I will allow the author to represent this legislation if they wish.
Hi guys. So as you can see, I guess the layout has been changed a bit, not necessarily the content, more of just how it's presented today. For the most part, I would say majority of it has stayed the same with the same intentions. I would like to say that before we get into this, I would please ask if you review this fully before there's any minor critiques that discredits all my other work regarding this act, because I will not accept those critiques, given that if you're not looking at the act entirely, that's just something I'm not willing to hear today. Thank you.
You are muted, Luis.
I'm sorry, the poll results came in and they froze my computer, so I couldn't unmute myself, but I could tell that I was muted. So the poll results are in a vote of 31 to 1 to 1. The previous motion passes. Neha, I see you have your hand raised, so I will allow you to speak here.
I just want to say a huge thank you to Brittany. I know that this legislation started way beyond we've seen it. So thank you for being so resilient and bringing it up and up again and again. I can only imagine how mentally exhausting and physically exhausting it is to care about something so heavily for a year. And I'm happy that it's here again. So thank you for that. On behalf of Senate, I just want to say that the last Senate, it was 2 weeks ago now, there was some tension, and that is inevitable with some legislation we do bring up. It's happened in the past and it will happen in the future. All I'm going to say is it's my job to make this an inclusive place, and I'm willing to listen to both sides. I'm willing to listen to anyone at any time for however long. But I want this to be a very inclusive place. So I'm apologizing on behalf of Senate leadership and the people here if it was offensive or hurt anybody. I felt some hurt watching it as well, so I just want to apologize and hope from now on that it's inclusive, and that means to both sides, everyone. I'm not just meaning inclusive to one group, but inclusive to all. So thank you, Brittany, for bringing this up again and being strong enough to stand with us today.
Thank you, Neha.
Are there any other questions or points of discussion at this time? Chris.
Hi. So I just wanted to apologize for my raspy voice. I'm getting over a cold, but thankfully it wasn't the coronavirus. So I just wanted to start by saying that I think this is a really great bill and it has a lot of good parts to it. But I just wanted to also continue our conversation from the last Senate meeting concerning the defund the police cause. So I just have a question for the author, and I was hoping, Luis, you'd let me have a couple follow-up questions too. Is the defunding the police clause of this bill more of like a political statement, or is it just more about finding funding bill?
So I'm actually going to rule that out of order, considering the discussion that we had last time. Last time it was made abundantly clear that the undergraduate student government supports the sentiment defund the police through previous legislative actions that we've taken. I think that regardless of the answer to that question, it should not be a reason to amend or change this legislation in any way. And for that reason, I will invite you to speak again at another time, like later on in discussion, if you have a question that isn't along those lines. But we will not be entertaining that debate at this time, I'm sorry to say. You may motion to overrule the chair as it outlines in our standing rules that we just passed, but
Yes,
I would not smile on that.
I would like to motion to overrule the chair just because I wasn't here for those other debates regarding defunding the police, and I know a lot of other senators were not here as well during those debates.
Is there a second to the motion to overrule the decision of the chair?
I second.
Okay, Senator Ben Gladstone seconds my decision to overrule my decision. It requires a 66% majority to overrule my decision. So please vote. Overruling. Here, let me type. Overrule my decision. Yeah, go for it. Well, abstaining isn't a thing in this particular motion. You vote for or vote against if you're a senator. The poll is open at this time.
Can you clarify if for or against is for continuing the discussion or not? I'm just a little confused.
So for is for continuing the discussion regarding defunding the police. Against is for not continuing the discussion regarding defund the police. You need a 66% majority for in order to overrule my decision.
In any of these circumstances where someone opposes a decision of the chair, when you're voting for, that just means that you think the chair was wrong and you want them to change their decision, or in this case, allow discussion to continue. Against means you support his decision.
In a vote of 15 to 17, this motion fails and we will not be discussing this topic. If you would like to discuss this particular topic, you are welcome to bring another piece of legislation to the Senate floor. But this will not be discussed for the duration of this particular piece of legislation. All right. Are there any other points of discussion on this legislation? I'm going to lower all of the hands of the people who currently have their hand up. If you would like to speak, please re-raise your hand. Katie.
Hi again, everyone. I just want to echo what Neha said earlier about being really proud of B. I want to stress that it took a year for this to get to USG Senate. I think that's too long. I also want to stress that this piece of legislation passed through both academic affairs and student services, which is half of the 4 main committees that USG has. Becky and I looked at this legislation closely. Our committees looked at this very closely. We are hoping that you trust the decision that our committees made is all I want to say. I'm proud of her. I think that this is really important. Mental health helps everyone, period. No matter what race you are, no matter what gender you are, no matter what anything you are. This will help anyone and everyone. And I stand by that. So I want to congratulate you, B, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you, Katie. Darren, you are recognized to speak on this matter.
Hello, everyone. I'll be brief, but I really wanted, piggyback off of everybody in saying that this, I really wanted to emphasize the importance of this act, especially in this day and age and where, we see a lot of political strife, a lot of social strife, a lot of issues with the virus and whatnot. I think that this bill is long overdue, especially, as I said before, in this current climate that we have. I think that if we all have the best interest of our constituents and the university in mind, we would pass this immediately. The fact that this was, in the works for a year is mind-boggling. And I'd like to really, commend, the writers and the folk who really worked on this bill, because this is a very necessary bill, and this is a sort of change in our work that we ought to see within this organization. So it has my full support, and I really urge my fellow senators to see that as well.
Thank you, Darren. Michael, President Hernandez.
Thanks for recognizing me. I just have a question about the content in the bill. Nothing specific, just would like to learn how we came to these recommendations. Is this work being guided by advice from mental health professionals? I think I'd like to know a little bit more about how we came to these recommendations, because I do know that the university has been working very hard to get information about how to address mental health. And there's a report coming out soon. So I'm just wondering if it would be worth waiting for that information to be available and incorporate it into this legislation, so that we are all elevating the work that's being done in the university, to make sure we're not replicating work, but rather elevating each other's work. So I just wanted some clarification on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally see where you're coming from. I actually worked on the mental health task force, I think, for about 6 months, and they addressed it a bit, but unfortunately nothing was really done due to COVID and a lot of other things. While they said that they were taking on a lot of initiatives to collect research data or whatever they plan on doing to expand their mental health resources and education, nothing was really done within that task force. From my personal experience, even before the task force, I personally wrote this from the stance of a regional campus student. So from my knowledge, nothing is being replicated from working with the dean of students and other folks as well. While the task force had it in their hands, they chose not to act on it. So that's why it has ended up in the hands of USG stores.
Thank you, Brittany. We will now move on to Becky.
Hey, y'all. I fully stand with everything B is writing in this and that Katie and Darren have said. I agree that, as also serving on the mental health task force, we have not seen change yet. It's been a long process. And in terms of looking at where this information comes from, I think it's been quite clear from student statements at Mental Health Action Day, through surveys, through talking to our peers, that I think that's where perhaps a lot of this is guided from, as well as our own personal experiences. And I don't think that those should ever be questioned. I think that those should be valid enough to move forward with. I think that we, more than anyone, know our experiences and know our struggles. And I think that's what guides this. And I think that we should be repeating. I think that we should be reiterating mental care and mental health in multiple reports and multiple legislations. Let's keep repeating it. Let's pass this every week is what I'm saying. I don't think there's ever too much. So I just kind of want to clarify that. And again, thank you, B, so much for this. It's incredible. And I urge everyone to pass it, as it should easily.
Thank you, Becky. President Hernandez. Do you want me to call you Michael or President Hernandez? I don't know.
You can call me Mike.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks. And thanks for all the answers. And thank you for recognizing me one more time. I'd like to just bring one more point to this conversation. I'd like to remind all of us present here today that we have over 18,000 undergraduate students. And while a lot of us get caught up in a lot of circles of leadership and really awesome people like Brittany, who are doing really hard work for the university, I do want us to be, very intentional about making sure we're including all voices. So I personally don't think we should be disallowing discussion on certain topics. And, just because we voted on matters like defunding the police doesn't mean that members, new members especially, and this is a very special Senate. We have a lot of new senators, people like Chris, they should be able to ask questions. And if his inquiries are relevant to the legislation at hand, he should be allowed to ask those questions, whether or not we agree with those points, because this is a public forum. And there is an agreement that if we're coming to a public forum, we're also coming to make sure that we're listening to all points. You know, I think that's part of that has to be part of the conversation. We need to be willing and respectful and strong enough to be able to hear each other. So I just wanted to make sure that we're aware of what we're doing here. Thank you.
Christine.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to once again obviously speak in support of B and her legislation and work on this. I think the fact that it's taken over a year to get this passed through USG, whether it be on a regional campus or at our main campus at stores, I think it's really important to keep in mind what Becky had said earlier, how mental health should definitely be a topic that we continue discussion in. It wouldn't hurt to have statements repeated. Also, just emphasize that yes, all voices should be heard, but we should also keep in mind that we have a level of respect that we should have for one another, and just realizing the privilege that we hold, and just how our intentions and words can impact different communities differently. Also, just want to reemphasize that we are USG, we are democratically led. We did hold a vote, and the main consensus was that we would do away with that discussion. So I don't want to be redundant in that section. Yeah, thank you.
On the topic of discussing this issue, and I am very glad to do so in a piece of legislation where that is the focus of the topic. I encourage you, if you feel strongly that this organization should not take that stance, write that legislation, bring it to this body. Until you do so, this is the stance of the organization, and we will not debate it in a secondary piece of legislation that covers far more areas. On that front, I would also like to emphasize that if you wanted to have that discussion, you were welcome to do so when it was referred to the Diversity and Outreach Commission last week. You could have reached out to the Chief Diversity Officer, and that time was made available to as many senators who wanted it. So, with that, I would like to say that I'm sorry. I don't like to use my power as the chair to push through this discussion, but we had this discussion last week and it did not go well. With that, I will go to Sarah Hill.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to echo what everyone has said, commending B for this. They put a lot of effort into this, and I think it's sort of my personal take on legislation that sometimes the most important thing is that we get our foot in the door with admin and we can start having these conversations with them when they haven't listened to us in the past without legislation. So can I make a motion to like vote on it now?
You can move you can move the previous question. I don't know if that exists anymore, but I'll accept it. I'll consider that a limit on debate. Yes, we can move into a vote now. I won't try to do it by unanimous consent as it is a controversial piece. The poll is open now. Senators, you have 2 minutes. Go for it. As a word of warning, there are 16 people who have not yet voted, and we have 54 seconds remaining. 10 seconds remaining. All right. In a vote of 24 to 2 to 9, this Mental Care Act passes. Give me a moment for it to process. Like it has to save the poll every time, so my screen gets frozen and I can do nothing. And I don't, frankly, remember what is next on the agenda. So give me just a moment. Next on the agenda, we have addressing the university's response to past and future acts of anti-Semitism and other bias-related incidents. I will allow the authors to present this legislation at this time. Feel free to unmute yourselves and begin.
I spoke on this in the committee meeting last night, but I wanted to know if any of the other authors wanted to speak. If not, I can.
I know that Dory is here tonight. I don't know if she wanted to speak first.
Sure, I can go ahead and speak on it. Hi, I'm Dory. I'm the president of UConn Hillel currently. And Sam actually approached me wanting to create a legislation to address the recent rise in bias incidents, especially relating to anti-Semitism. And I was very, very grateful for that. It was nice to feel as though we had an ally on this campus. So basically, the main purpose of the legislation is to, because of these acts, especially the 3 that recently happened in South Campus, we want to ask the USG and the school to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which is held as one of the gold standards as a working definition of anti-Semitism, and takes into account all of the issues that Jews themselves feel are anti-Semitism. And I believe you should always listen to the person who is feeling this discrimination, this prejudice, as to what counts as discrimination or prejudice. And then also, it is asking for statements about bias incidents to be released not just to the people that live in the residence hall where it occurred, but to the entire school. It's asking for statements to be made in an official manner, not on unofficial social media pages. It is asking for those responses to be swift and very strict, and also for students or other group not to have to ask for those statements, that instead they should be something that the university is actively seeking to release. I believe that is pretty much everything, the scope of the legislation, but if any of the other authors want to speak more on it.
I think that's all that we really need to talk about in the discussion. Should we motion to put it to a vote, or is there
that's a little bit premature. Let's see if there's any discussion or questions first. Are there any questions or discussion for the authors? Let's do questions first. Are there any questions for the authors? Ben Kilty.
I had a statement of support, so I can go.
Yeah, we'll wait a moment for questions first. Are there any questions for the authors on this legislation?
Yeah.
I don't see who that is. Go for it.
Okay, so my question is, how do we balance the importance of due process with the goals of trying to provide immediate responses to harmed parties? I think there's a serious risk of assuming things to be bias-related incidents, which might not necessarily be the case. And I think it's evident, especially in other incidents. Like, I was looking at speech codes around the country, and people have been accused of racism for things that they haven't in fact done. And I worry that like having an immediate response that's official might undercut other values that the university should hold.
Thank you. I'll yield to the Chief Diversity Officer, Douglas, on this point.
Thank you. I'd like to mention before I speak that I am speaking as this was a question. I'm responding as an author. This I hear that as a concern, but I don't think that that's necessarily a concern with this legislation. This is about how the university responds, and that it needs to recognize acts of bias as such. We're not really speaking to what the investigative process is here. I don't think that that was the intent.
But it says it like pretty explicitly, though. It says the response.
You point to where it talks about the investigative process.
I'd appreciate a lack of crosstalk. If you would like to follow up, please ask first. But feel free to follow up now.
Okay. It says responses should be immediate, as a delay can send a message that the response is not as serious as intended. I see that as a direct saying that, like, an investigation is not something that is prioritized in this legislation.
So I think that would be something like saying that carving a swastika into a wall at South, like denouncing that immediately and publicly, is what we're going for here.
Do you have a follow-up point?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, so let's see. We will move to Needy Nar. I don't know if I said your name. I do apologize.
It's okay. Hi. I wanted to ask about how what exactly the authors of this legislation would like recommend to the university in terms of like strong, strict stance against bias incidents. What exactly do you think is the appropriate response for the university to like respond to these kind of incidents happening in the future?
Would any of the authors like to respond?
Yeah, I can speak to us. I think that for me, at least, that would look like the statement, we do not condone this. This is unacceptable. Acts of this type of bias are not tolerated on this campus. That type of strong wording that doesn't lead it up to interpretation, what the school's stance on acts of bias are. And again, that's just a statement on the act of bias, not a punishment for the perpetrator, not accusing a perpetrator. It's just a statement that those types of incidents are not tolerated on this campus.
Thank you.
Thank you both. We will move to Sam.
So yeah, to double down on that point, we said responses should be immediate. Responses are not punishments. Responses are not ends to investigations. A lot of times what happens with these investigations is we have no idea what the status of the investigations are for, it could be for months. And what we would like is just an acknowledgement of it happening is a first step. So for example, the things that happened in South, all we need is a official response by the university saying that it happened, saying that this is an incident of bias. We don't have to accuse anybody. We're not asking the university to take their suspects and tell the entire university who they're going to say. We're just saying acknowledge this for the university, because it makes knowing that the administration at least has an eye on it and is looking into it, it makes the community feel a lot safer.
Just a quick reminder, we're still in the question portion of this and not in the discussion portion. I do appreciate your comments, but we're going to try to hold discussion until later. Well, now we are in the discussion portion because all the hands went down as I said that, so I do apologize. We are now in the discussion portion. Please raise your hand if you have a point of discussion on this legislation. Neha.
Again, thank you for putting this together. I know you mentioned it last Senate that you were working on it because two senators in our little breakout room or in caucus were like, oh, we should do this. And I'm so happy that you did this. I don't know if it's your first legislation, but it looks great. So thank you. I think student government and UConn should be putting out statements, anti-racist statements and sentiments like that more often. Just mirroring what you just said, Sam, and what Damani said, responses should be immediate. I don't think immediate means 1 minute after. I think it means as soon as they possibly can acknowledge it. So when something is overtly racist, you don't have to say who did it. You can just say a racist incident happened, an anti-Semitic thing happened, and this dorm and just email it out to everyone. It doesn't have to say person this. I don't really think they ever email like a person when it comes to a bias related incident. Some cases that aren't as overt and are more like quiet or less like openly racist, they do go under investigation. Quick or slow, whatever it is, they usually don't put out an immediate statement, but I think that can still happen. Like I said, like a broad one. And if it's really like tough to navigate and it's under investigation, like usually the university won't put out a statement, but I think this is nice to push the university to always acknowledge it. So I'm really with this. I think that's a really good thing that you put in there, although it might be a little controversial. I think it'll push the university to really make a stance right when things happen, because students are hurting right when it happens. So why won't they acknowledge that hurt?
Ben Keelty.
Yeah, so I just want to speak very strongly in support of this language, or in support of this bill. You know, I was someone, I'm Jewish myself, and I was hurt by the acts of anti-Semitism, but I was even more hurt by the fact that it took more than 3 weeks after, I think it was almost a month from when the incident happened to when an official, you know, press release and when an official announcement was made on university channels. And that's frankly unacceptable. You know, I understand the desire, and I think it's important that we not, you know, act and want to punish someone immediately before we know all the facts. But that's not what this is talking about. You know, an immediate response is and should just be, you know, saying this was bad in, you know, a paragraph or two. It doesn't need to be a huge thing. It doesn't need to give details on investigations, which we shouldn't be doing. All it needs to do is, you know, the moment we hear about stuff getting torn down, stuff getting carved into walls, that should be an immediate response from the university saying this is bad. And I think that not doing that gives some people the sense that their hurt doesn't matter to the university, which is the exact opposite of what we want. And so I think that this, while it's certainly not going to solve anti-Semitism, it's certainly not going to solve the issue, is a very strong step in the right direction. And I am strongly in support of this legislation.
Lakita.
Hi, so I want to speak strongly in favor of this legislation, and I don't want to french fry off of what everyone else has said, but I actually do want to ask if anyone happens to have had the chance to read the report on free speech and civility that UConn has officially, you know, endorsed back in 2017, and even President Thomas Catley has reaffirmed it when he joined the office. I just want to know if anyone is currently aware of it, and if not, I would normally put it in the chat, but I can send it over to Speaker Toscano and have it send it as like an email to everyone. But I would just suggest looking at that, because it talks about, you know, what the university can and can't do, and like what it does, and at times where like free speech hurts other sentiments, and this goes beyond hurt. But I personally, after having read it, I felt like that it doesn't do enough. And so I would just suggest that everyone gives a look at it, and you know, if anyone feels that things can be changed about that, or there needs to be further changes made considering all the recent events that have happened, I would recommend you all do so.
Lakita, if you could do me a favor and send it in the USG group me, and I will send it out in my next official email.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Actually, also, I don't know if I can, as a senator, ask, but like, can this be something that the CDO, the commission looks at, the diversity, and I forgot the name, but the commission looks into?
I would leave that to Chief Diversity Officer Douglas and anyone on the commission. So I can yield to Damani if he would like to speak, but if he doesn't, we can discuss that at a later date.
Sure, I'll speak. No, this you know, this looks good to me, and as I read it, it is a you know, it went through development. It looks good. I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you. On to Ben Gladstone.
What this legislation does is creates official bias and unofficial bias, because the university decides what's biased and
responds to it. So it kind of creates two tiers of bias. And once they rule on what's biased, that allows for them to, because all bias is bad whether it's approved by a university or not.
Thank you for that point, Ben. I'm going to be capping debate at the remaining speakers with their hands up in the effort of time. So the 5 on my screen at this moment will be the last 5 to speak on this matter, and then we will move into a vote. This begins, well, 4 rather, because Ben just spoke. So this will begin with Sam.
So I guess to respond to Ben, first of all, this doesn't really, I don't think this really sets a precedent for the university with how the university views bias. I know we all have, I don't know if this is actually just for RSOs, but I'm pretty sure everybody goes through bias training when you come into the university with that little module. So the university does, in many different ways, take a stance on what they view bias to be. And I think, the university is fully capable of deciding what bias incidents are, and I don't think this is going to make them change that in any way. Otherwise, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I think this is, I don't think there needs to be a definition of bias added to this. I think it's kind of covered.
Thank you, Sam. On to Sarah Hill.
I just wanted to sort of echo what Ben Keelty said before. I think it's amazing that you were able, everyone who were authors wrote this and wrote it as well as they did. I'm also Jewish, and I used to live in the dorm where this incident happened. So I got that email and saw the time lag between then and when there was a response to it. And while I didn't recognize the emotions I was having to it, obviously there were some emotions there. So I'm very glad to see this statement. I think it's really important that USG takes a stand against these hateful incidents. And yeah, I'm proud of all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. On to Ben Keelty.
I'd like to respond directly to the comments of Senator Gladstone, because respectfully, I think that is a mischaracterization of what this bill is doing. First of all, UConn already does decide what a bias-related incident is. You can see the definition on the Dean of Students website, in the Dean of Students office, community standards, the Chief Diversity Officer. There's other offices that already take in these reports and decide if it's a bias-related incident. This legislation does not establish that. This legislation does not change that. This legislation does not require that. All this legislation asks, or at least the bias response protocol part of this legislation, all it asks is that the university quickly and forcefully come out against any acts of bias. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do. I don't think it creates any more bias. And in fact, I think it sends the important message that we will not tolerate bias on this campus. And I think that in and of itself would go a long way to making a lot of people feel safer and more respected. Thank you.
The final 2 speakers will be Darren Mack and then Damani. Darren, you have the floor now.
All right. Well, firstly, I'd like to send much love and appreciation to those who are authors of this bill. This bill is excellent. But again, I don't want to sound like a broken wheel, and I will keep it brief. But we can't play politics and do these things where we begin to nitpick and make assumptions on the basis of what we see and what we think. Especially in regards to this bill, UConn has a reputation in being shiftless, being ineffective in regards to really taking a stance on a lot and really being proactive and fighting against these sort of issues. And I think that, especially the Jewish community in Yukon, they ought to have this because when these things happen, what are we supposed to do? Sit by and just let it happen? I mean, the least that we can do is condemn it. It's not a big action, but it sets a sort of stance in saying that we're not going to tolerate this. I don't understand what's the issue in condemning, these sorts of actions because they're terrible, and I would really question the integrity of someone who would think otherwise. So I would really, charge my other peers and colleagues to really look at this from a stance in which, we have this bill right here. What do we want to do? I made the point earlier, and what side of history do you want to stand on and whatnot? That's all from me.
Thank you, Darren. On to Damani.
I wanted to clarify two things because I just got a number of text messages. The first is when Senator Keelty spoke, he mentioned the chief diversity officer. He's referring to the universities, not me. I do not play any official role in the university's investigations. That is Dr. Frank Tuitt. The second thing I wanted to clarify is when I spoke before about what would and would not be considered in the commission. I thought that Senator Athena was referring to this legislation. She was not. She was referring to the president's thing on free speech. And I misconstrued what she had said, and my response was inconsistent with the question that she was asking. No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Would you care to answer the question she was asking now?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't understand.
The question was whether or not the president's statement on civility and free speech would be something that could be looked at in the commission. And I will read it over and then provide a more direct answer to that. And I'll pass that answer along to all of you.
Thank you, Damani. We will now move into a vote on this legislation. I'm opening the poll at this point in time. There will be 2 minutes as usual. Please vote within 2 minutes. Please do not vote for anything except not a senator if you are not a senator. Yes, I'll be saving the results. We will be verifying them after Senate to ensure that only senators voted in all of them, just to be clear for everyone. And they should be available on the minutes. Seeing as more than 50% of the room has voted in favor and less than 100% of the room are voting members of the Senate, we will consider this passed. I will give you an exact tally once the timer is done. If the author of the statement of position on the Coca-Cola contract, or I can't read the statement of position on the Coca-Cola contract, would like to begin introducing their legislation, please feel free to do so at this time.
Awesome. Thank you. So the current Coca-Cola contract Yukon has had and signed all possible extension on for years fully ends at the end of this June, and from previous meetings I've had with procurement officials, they're looking to form a new one with Coca-Cola or Pepsi. However, Coca-Cola has a long history of human rights violations, and they and other similar corporations are being sued for contributing to plastic pollution and for misleading consumers. Also, plastic pollution contributes significantly to deaths in developing countries, and plastic production contributes greatly to the current climate crisis and produces toxic pollutants with adverse health effects that disproportionately affect BIPOC communities. Along with those facts, an IPCC report outlined we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly within the next 10 years to keep our planet healthy, meaning Yukon's actions with the next contract, if they form one, are extremely important. So, Given all that and the positions and actions USG has already taken in support of BIPOC students, fighting climate change, and our commitment to clean water accessibility, plastic reduction, and sustainability, and given the fact that students deserve access to conscious consumer choices, we are resolving 1. Students need to be included in discussion over any new contract if one is to be formed. 2. We're still committed to the installation of refill stations and will push UConn itself to actually take care of their students by installing the stations. 3. We do not support corporations who contribute significantly to unsustainable practices or that commit human rights violations or forming contracts with them. And 4, we support the university working with more sustainable brands. So, before I give it to Ben in case he has anything he wants to add, I wanted to share my excitement of the day with you, as it is very much related to this. I got an email around noon today from Kyle Muncy of the Office of Strategic Partnerships and Business Development, who I've met with before about the Coca-Cola contract and refill stations, saying that he saw this statement of position. On the email, I can see someone had forwarded it to him, saying they saw it put out by Student Services and that it is potentially related to their recommendations for sustainable purchasing and is something to keep in mind. And Kyle asked when I was available to discuss the current state of the process and next steps, which I immediately looped Ben into, and now we have a meeting on Monday. So that's relevant, very exciting, and shows how much of an effect we can have. Now I'll let Ben add anything if he wants to.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's really well said about what's been going on with this piece of legislation. And I want to give a little context as to why we're doing this. So Coca-Cola forms a lot of contracts like this with a lot of universities. But because Coca-Cola has that long list of human rights violations and are very unsustainable, they're the #1 plastic polluter in the world. A lot of times these campuses come together, they organize and kick Coca-Cola off of their campus. Like they literally make the university end their contract. So this contract will be up next June. Obviously, because of COVID, like we can't organize like that. So instead we had to do it through like these meetings with people like Kyle Muncy. And, having the statement of position is just a really good piece of the argument that students support sustainability and that we don't want these unsustainable corporations having a monopoly on pouring at universities. So that's basically why we're doing this. But Sarah said it very well. And if you have any questions, we're open to them.
Thank you to Ben and Sarah. We will first open to questions as we did before, and then we will move into discussion. So if you have your hand up now, you want to ask a question. We will start with Braden.
Hi, guys. Thank you for writing this bill. It's an awesome bill. I just had a question. You mentioned Pepsi at the very beginning. I think Sarah did. Are you saying that UConn should go with them, or like I'm just what is the other option? I'm asking.
We're definitely not saying that UConn should go with Pepsi. They're another one of those completely unsustainable brands. We're really just advocating for them to work with more sustainable corporations.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, like we don't need a contract. Like we could have a contract with a more sustainable brand that's not Coke, Pepsi, or Nestle, but we don't need a contract. We can there are ways to go around that the other campuses do that you can look into, and I'm happy to talk about that and show you what we found when we're doing that research.
Thank you, Ben. Ben Keelty.
That pretty much actually exactly was my question, and Albie, which was, what does it look like for us not to have a contract? Because I think it is more powerful if at the end of this we have, we give some sort of specific recommendation and support. And so can you talk a little bit more about that?
So couple of things that we were looking at was there is Hosmer soda and another one. I think it's called Avery's. They are local soda bottling companies like that are around Willimantic and the Yukon area that are much more committed to sustainability, and they have much of a less of an impact on the environment. So we'd probably look at something like that, but we would probably leave the specifics up to the university and the people who are more experts on this.
Thank you. Irene.
So I absolutely love this bill. Big congratulations to everyone who wrote it. Amazing work. I'm wondering if you've reached out to the President's Committee for, I think it's Corporate Social Responsibility. I think that they might be a good talking point. I don't know if you have, I know you've spoken to Kyle. But either that or advocating for larger student representation on that committee might be a good way to make sure that this goes through all the way into the future as well. I don't know if you have, if you've done that, but if you could speak to that a little bit.
We have not yet, but we definitely can do that after it passes.
Thank you, and then Chris will have the final question before we move into discussion.
Hi, I just wanted to say I really like the idea of increasing the water stations on campus in that bill. I live in West Campus, and I've heard this complaint from a lot of other students too. There isn't really many other options after the dining halls close to get kind of just a healthy drink. So I really appreciate you putting that in there.
Thank you, Chris. We will now move into points of discussion. If anyone has a point of discussion, please raise your hand at this time. President Hernandez, or Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for recognizing me again. So this is a very interesting bill, and it's got some really interesting corporations. So I know the discussion so far has been focused on Coca-Cola, but there's two other companies that are named in that bill, which are PepsiCo and Nestle. So I'm looking at this, if we're, terminating a contract or not supporting them. So Nestle Waters North America is headquartered in Stamford. So this is a business that helps and employs our state. And it's a company that's been in our state for a while. PepsiCo as well is headquartered in Westchester, which is right next to Connecticut. And I know plenty of people personally that work there. And in fact, their first female CEO lives in Greenwich. She's a Connecticut resident. And she does a lot of work for the state on a volunteer basis. So, I'm really concerned that these companies are getting called out, even though they're in our backyard. So, I would love to see more research incorporated to sort of seek out for Connecticut companies, and also, to take into account the fact that these companies contribute positively to the state in other ways. So, I would just like to bring that point into our discussion.
Will Shad.
Thanks, Luis. So I'll keep myself as brief as possible. I definitely understand Mike's concerns. And while I do think they're valid, I also think that we really need to be considering the sustainability of these corporations. Having using a corporation that employs a lot of folks in Connecticut may look like a good thing on the surface, but if that corporation is doing more overall harm to our environment, our community in general, I think then we really need to keep those things in mind as well. And I think in this case, just passing this statement of position and making these arguments may, have an effect on these corporations. If UConn questions our contract, they may begin bettering their practices just like that, and we won't have to cancel them. So I really think at the very least, we need to make it known that we are not comfortable with what these corporations are doing. We're not comfortable with the fact that they do human rights abuses and that they're very, very unsustainable. I think that local industry is definitely something we should be considering as well. But overall, I genuinely think that the climate crisis we're dealing with, along with the human rights crisis we're dealing with all over the world, should really take precedence when we're considering what can we do as students to better the global society. So that's kind of where I stand on this. I'm definitely in favor. I understand, what Mike was saying, but I really think that the pros here outweighs the cons.
Becky?
Hi. Yeah, so to Will's point, I do think we should be mindful of our roles here. We're here as students to support one another, and we're here to support our futures. We're not here to appease administration or the state. I do think that although close quarters or local does not always mean sustainable, and as Ben Albee pointed out, there's also more local sustainable options. So it's kind of one of those situations where it's this or that, but it's not that black and white. It's not that clear, and I think we should be mindful of all the factors and further, like, I think at the front of our mind should be the effect that this will have for our future and our constituents and our students who will like, what will they want in the future for their university to comply with and to host as need as a source. So thank you.
To add that news.
All right. The next speaker that we will recognize is Mitchell.
Alrighty, yeah. I think what Mike was saying is super valid and something that we should think about. But I just wanted to state kind of my support for this bill. I just took a look at it yesterday, I think, and I was pretty surprised. I didn't know this was in the works, and I just want to say, like, wow, I'm glad that as a Senate, like, we're thinking about these types of issues in terms of sustainability, in terms of all of this and global issues. Yes, we're in Connecticut. Yes, we're UConn students, but really thinking about the bigger picture here, I think that's super important and super admirable. Additionally, I think either way, it's also a good thing for UConn. Like, yes, if we look at potentially the jobs down in Stanford or some of this stuff, I think that's important stuff to look at. But UConn does try to stand true and does try to tout a lot, both in like PR, recruiting students, or like whatever, that we are a green campus, that we are a very green school. And I think we can always work to improve that. I think this would be a strong way of saying, hey, look, yeah, the students care about this stuff. We're trying to create a better future for all of us. And it's something we're concerned about. And I think what's important is if this passes, that if the contract is terminated or anything like that, that whoever is responsible, I'm new here, so I don't actually know who's like controlling those contracts, but that they make it clear, like, hey, like, this is why the students wanted this ended, is because you guys aren't sustainable. Don't just be like, oh, we're choosing Pepsi because they're cheaper this year. Like, make it clear, like, why the contract is in question, or at least why the student body feels it should be in question.
Thank you for your thoughts, Mitchell. I'm going to cap debate at the 4 speakers that I have currently who wish to speak, and then we will move into a vote. So the next one would be Ben Kilty.
Howdy. I'd like to add on to what the previous 3 speakers have said, because I think it's great. I'd also like to point out, again, that what Becky said, which is that these, you know, the two alternatives that Ben and Sarah offered are Avery's and Hoomer, which are both in our backyard, and they are sustainable. So this isn't about choosing to go with Pepsi or Nestle, which will employ Connecticuters, and some other company that won't. This is about choosing whether we want to give our money to a mega corporation that's in Connecticut or even outside of Connecticut, or a smaller local business that's in Connecticut. And frankly, you know, I think that it's, even from an economic standpoint, it's an advantage to us if we have, you know, if we go with one of these local businesses, because now we have a business with strong ties to UConn right in our backyard. I mean, that generally translates to jobs for students. That translates to a lot of good things. And in addition, we're being sustainable. And in addition, we're more directly helping the local economy than we would be if we were giving money to, you know, these multinational conglomerates. You know, Avery's is very, very much a small local business. And I'm very much in support of going to a more local and more sustainable pouring contract.
Thank you, Senator. Chris, you are recognized next.
Hi. So I was looking at a list of the current UConn vendors, and I noticed that most of them are not sustainable in any way. And so I was just wondering that if we pass this bill, are we making a statement that UConn shouldn't do business with any of the companies that pollute in any ways? Because I don't know if that would be a realistic thing to do. And then also another thing I want to add is that our meal plans are already pretty high, the price of them as is. So if we choose another vendor, which may choose another bidder, which may increase our meal plan prices, I think that might hurt the poorer students more than some other students. So that might have some negative implications there.
I'll allow the author to kind of respond to that comment, and then we'll finish off the speakers list and move into a vote.
So
Go ahead.
thank you. So specifically with this statement of position, it's sort of directly about the pouring contract. So disregarding the other unsustainable contracts we may have, while we could choose to take a position against those in favor of more sustainable options in the future, right now we're focusing specifically on this pouring contract. And I don't know too much details about dining, but I know they do separate things from the rest of the university, I think, in general. And if I can, in response to Mitchell's point before about terminating the contract, I potentially, after this meeting on Monday, may be given permission, that's the word I'm looking for, to write a letter saying all the bad stuff about Coca-Cola that Coca-Cola will see. So we will directly point out this is why we're not going to form a contract with you in the future.
Thank you, Sarah. We will now move into Irene's point, and then we will move into a vote.
Thank you, Louise. I think we're all really on the same page here. When we think back to Mike's point, when we're talking about losing jobs in Stanford and in Connecticut, that is a student issue as well, because students may have family members that will suffer from that, and that could impact their ability to attend UConn, among many other issues. But I don't really think that it's a matter of questioning whether or not we want local brands. I think we're all in agreement that we do want local brands. So I would just advise maybe adding in when we say we want more sustainable brands for pouring services, that we're also looking at local sustainable brands. Just, I think, making that distinction as a student body to ensure that we don't contribute to the university making a decision that results in many students having serious financial consequences. So I do like the idea of changing our vendors. I think it's great legislation. That's just a small suggestion that I would make so that we're more intentional with our language.
What was your suggestion again, Irene? Sorry, I missed it.
That we add in local when we talk about we want more sustainable brands, just adding in that we want them to be local as well, or at least in Connecticut.
Okay. Would you like to motion to make that amendment? Because if so, we can avoid going into a debate immediately.
I would.
Okay. Is there a second to that amendment?
Wait, can it just be taken as friendly? Sorry, point of information.
It can, but I want to take the second first.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a second. Is that friendly? I'll ask the authors.
Yes.
Yes.
It is.
Okay. Would the authors care to amend that language in? Because I don't know exactly where to put it.
Well,
so feel free.
Irene, would you say that in that last therefore be resolved, say the university to work with more sustainable, local brands? I think that would do it.
I think that would be good.
Okay. Since it's friendly, there's no need to vote on this amendment. And we will move into a vote on the legislation as a whole. So to be clear, we aren't voting on adding in local brands. That is the status of the legislation now, because it was taken as a friendly amendment. Actually, no, wait, you have to take objections. Are there any objections to it being taken as a friendly amendment? Sorry, I forgot my procedure for a moment. Seeing no objections, this legislation is friendly, and it is so. We will now move into a vote on the legislation at whole. I'm going to keep doing the poll because now that I know that it doesn't have to be 5 minutes, I'm more open to doing actual votes. So the poll is being opened. It will be open for the next 2 minutes. Please vote accordingly if you are a senator or not a senator. Please, yes. I will be checking afterwards, and I will be docking votes as appropriate for the minutes. While the vote is going on, I will open up the next piece of legislation.
Should I go, Luis, or do you want me to wait?
Can you wait until it goes above 50% of the room voting
Yes.
for it? Okay, thank you, Katie. We're at 49% currently. So if you're for the previous, okay, we're above 50%. Oh wait, I can actually announce the results of the previous one. The results were like 31 to 2 to 0 to 2 on the legislation from before that I didn't announce. The exact numbers will be in the minutes, but it did overwhelmingly pass. This one I will announce. I'll actually remember to do it this time. I do apologize. The system is new to me. Katie, feel free to introduce this legislation.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start off by saying that I'm gonna go into exactly like what we're proposing. I'm gonna, go into a little bit of detail because I know that this is probably the first time that a lot of people are seeing this, and that's okay. I also want to say that after I speak, I'm going to yield to B and Mason to talk. B and Mason wrote this alongside me. B is the president of UCO, and Mason is the president of NAACP. So that's what's going to happen after I go. So this has come up today because of many reasons that the legislation highlights. I would like to point your attention to the whereas clause that I'm highlighting. You should probably see it. Yep, that one right there. It talks about how when the university's anti-Black racism course launched on September 14th, 2020, there were concerns from students that the course wasn't enough and that, specifically UConn already has a lot of anti-racism courses. We have a lot of intersectional courses. We have a lot of courses in WIGs. We have a lot of courses in human rights. So essentially, students were saying that, they said, I don't think we necessarily need another course, but instead we need courses like this to be required to graduate. Someone else piggybacked off that first statement, and they said they believe that everyone should have to take at least one course like this to be able to graduate. And so what this is essentially saying, what this piece of legislation is essentially going for, is we would like to restructure and ultimately replace Content Area 4, which is currently diversity and multiculturalism. We want to replace that general education requirement with everything that is bolded, italicized, and highlighted in the legislation. Currently, I'll just give a little background. The current Content Area for Diversity and Multiculturalism general education requirement requires 2 courses, one from the USA and one international component. After talking with B and Mason, we discovered that Content Area 4 really isn't doing its job for teaching students about issues of diversity and multiculturalism. More specifically, students can take courses that fulfill Content Area 4 without realizing that they're fulfilling Content Area 4. So we believe that's a problem, and we believe that Content Area 4 is not doing its job. Another reason we don't think it's doing its job is because of all of the racial incidents that have happened at UConn that is highlighted at the top of the legislation. So with that said, this is what we are proposing. We would like to replace Content Area for Diversity and Multiculturalism with 2 societal literacy or S courses. We have the justification below. You can read that in your own time. And then in addition to that, required at some point in the first year for all first-year students, we would like all students to take the 1-credit anti-Black racism course that launched on September 14th, 2020. Again, justification is below. You can read it in your own time. The third component is that one of the required courses that is replacing Content Area 4 will be of the student's choice, but it has to revolve around race relations, specifically in America, to be taken during any of their 4 years at UConn. All of the justification is there. And then the last sort of component to this is that we would like one required course of the student's choice that brings an intersectional awareness to cultural and racism courses to be taken during any of the 4 years at UConn. Underneath all of this proposal, we meaning me, Mason, B, and the help of Sage from NACP, we compiled a master list of societal cultural awareness courses offered by the university. There are 17 pages worth of courses. There are enough courses that fulfill a diverse amount of departments. There are some courses in departments you wouldn't think there are courses in. So we've done our thorough research. The university has the courses to make this proposal a reality. Something important to note that I really want to highlight, and I will highlight it on the document, is that this societal and cultural awareness graduation requirement, this restructuring, replacing of Content Area 4, the only thing that it will involve is the addition of a single 1-credit course, a single 1 credit, not 3 credit, but 1 credit course. We believe for this reason that this requirement will not place additional strain on students when fulfilling their general education requirements. And based on UConn's deteriorating climate, we believe that it's important and absolutely necessary. So I'm going to just say, I collaborated really well with Mason from NAACP, with B from UCO, and we also worked with Honors for Diversity, and then with a little bit of input from Sage, from the Native American cultural programs and all of that. So I've consulted a variety of organizations. This is our joint solution. It's not just coming from academic affairs, but it also passed through academic affairs. And that's all I got to say. I don't want to ramble on too much and take up too much of your time, but I will yield to B and Mason. You can decide which one of you wants to go first.
I would just like to emphasize everything that Katie has said. I feel like this is extremely important, especially for UConn, given a lot of the things that have happened in the past. And while this education requirement won't solve everything, I think it is still a good step in the right direction. I don't expect it to solve everything or a lot of things at all. I just expect it to expand our education system and really have these conversations that withhold a lot of ignorance, so we could dismantle such harmful commentary and other things as well, especially within like hate speech and other things, and with the anti-Black racism class. As someone who has taken it, a lot of the material has been great. I think it would be beneficial for everyone to take, and I think that if we keep pushing classes like this, it's our best bet while we keep fighting for other reforms.
Absolutely. First of all, just wanted to say I'm very proud of this bill. I'm very proud of having come together with academic affairs and UCO, and Honors for Diversity and USG just in general to work to get this through. I will echo B's point from when we were talking about the Mental Care Act proposal. If you have any criticisms, I'd ask that you read the document in full. Because again, like Katie said, all we're essentially asking more of the students to do is to take a 1-credit course. Like she said, it's not a 3-credit course. It's not going to be strenuous. It's not going to be really, really in depth. It's only going to be so that anybody coming into UConn can get an anti-Black racist education. And to B's point, it's not perfect. It's not something that we expect to solve anti-Black racism or to change the culture on campus, but it will alter the way that we engage it in the academic setting. It's gonna involve everybody having to take it. It's gonna involve everybody having to engage with the content, so that nobody can say that they've come through UConn and not had some type of anti-racist education. To speak specifically on the race relations point, this is the point of time in which now more than ever we need to know about what's going on. This is a state. I'm from Jersey, but to come to Connecticut, the first thing I realized is that this is an incredibly racially disproportionate state. And there were people who came here to UConn that had never ever one time come into contact with a Black person, and there were Black people that had never one time come into contact with a white person. They lived in Connecticut all their lives, and what that really made me understand was that there's a true cultural ignorance that's present here, due to the separation that we have often in terms of where we live and where we go to school. Now, being in the same place, the onus is upon us to know and be aware of the cultures of other people, and to know how to engage with people, to know what's disrespectful and what's appropriate to say, to know how to act and how to behave. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that this is something that this is something that the university should have required a while ago. This is something that is long past due, but I'm glad we were able to get to it now. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be here to answer any questions about this.
Thank you to the authors for the work you've put into this bill and for the presentation you just gave. Before I entertain questions, I would just like to announce the result of the previous piece of legislation. In a vote of 26 to 4 to 1, the previous piece of legislation passes. Now on to questions. If you have a question for any of the three authors, please raise your hand at this time. I see one question from Eduardo as of now. Feel free to go, Eduardo.
Hi. My question is mainly on the research y'all did, the availability of the courses on campus. So, or, you know, in this university system more broadly. I know, at least from my experience being a senior, while finding courses, there are courses that are listed, but they don't have a professor assigned to it. Therefore, in that semester, there's no given class or for the whole year. So did your research in terms of the availability of courses focus on professor availability giving those sorts of courses?
I can answer that for you, Eduardo. So when we were doing this, B. Mason and I just went through the entire course catalog and listed every course that we found. We are aware that not every course may still have a professor assigned to it. We are aware that it might not be, you know, available. This semester, there are some courses that only are available in a, how do I say it, like a regulated basis. Like some are only offered in the spring, some are only offered in the fall. Like the way that UConn, you know, schedules its courses is very weird, and we acknowledge that. In creating this list, we wanted to let the university see every single course that is offered. If there's a professor that's not assigned to it, they can reevaluate that. That is something that I see is their job to do the work in reconfiguring and then coming back to us and saying, okay, these are the classes within that list that work. These are the classes in the list that don't work because they don't have a professor. Like, that's just something that I see, you know, them doing the legwork for. We are just here to provide them with everything that we found, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you for your answer, Katie. I appreciate it.
Nidhi?
Hi, I just wanted to ask a few clarifying questions. So Mason mentioned that we're going to have that you're advocating for one credit anti-Black racism course. But over here, you also mentioned a required course on race relations in America and a required course on intersectional awareness. So are you advocating for 3 required courses that every UConn student has to take?
Okay, I can answer that again quickly. So the two other courses that are 3 credit is what's going to essentially be replacing Content Area 4. So those 2 required courses are already within Content Area 4, but we are just reconfiguring it to be more specific. Instead of taking one course that's only USA, like that's the only like category, it's USA and international. Instead of being very vague and having one student take or having a student take a course that is specific to the USA versus, and then also taking a course that's like international. We want to make those categories more specific so that students are actually being taught a more focused education. One of the things that, you know, Mason and I were bouncing back and forth when we were talking about this is that, you know, they're trying with Content Area 4, but the reason it's not working is because the expectations are so vague. So essentially those 2 courses that you see, like they're going to be a direct replacement of Content Area 4. So we're replacing 2 3-credit courses with 2 3-credit courses, but it's more specialized, if that makes sense. And then the one credit course, sorry, had to say one twice. The one credit course is technically the one additional course that we would be adding that the university doesn't have already. To quickly clarify, the reason that we want this required for all first-year students is the other 2 courses a UConn student can take at in any 4 years of their experience here. We want all UConn students to get this sort of education when they walk in the door. So we believe that one credit, again, not strenuous. It is going to be very similar to the format it is now. We don't think that that's going to be that much of an extra burden, but to clarify, that is the one thing that we are technically adding, that one credit course, and then the other 2 are just replacing and making what we have now currently just more specialized and what we believe will get the point across in a clearer, more concise way, if that makes sense.
Could I follow up on another question, Louise?
Yes.
So you mentioned that like one of the required courses would be on race relations in America, and the other would be bringing intersectional awareness. But a lot of courses in Content Area 4 as of now don't really have anything to do with either two of these categories, but still include a lot of ideas on diversity across the human race and everything related to that. So I'm confused about where you're going to put those courses. Are you going to throw them in Content Area 3, or like how does it work?
So we essentially labeled in that huge, like, I really recommend everyone look at that huge, master list that we have put together and really delve deep into it. We have included every course that has anything related to human rights, anything that is related to diversity and inclusion, anything that is like super, like anything that falls into this category, like it's there. Whatever it's as wide scope, it's as wide in scope as possible, but it fits these new requirements. Again, this is just what we are presenting to the university, and it's up to the university to decide what they're going to do with those other courses that may not be, they still apply, but like not as much, if that makes sense. Like it's their job to determine where those courses will go.
Thank you, Katie.
Yes, thank you. Lakita, I see you put your hand up and then back down immediately. Do you have a question, or was that a mistake?
Oh, no, that was a mistake.
Okay, no worries. Seeing as we've exhausted questions, we will now enter into the discussion section of this. So anyone who would like to posit a point of discussion, please raise your hand at this point. Neha.
Thank you. This was a lot of hard work. I mean, the master list is just one part of it, and then writing up this legislation is another. So all of this took so much time. So thank you, Mason. Thank you, B. Thank you, Catherine. And I see Irene's name at the bottom, so thank you, Irene, too. This is beautiful. It is so needed. What Mason said, we're more segregated now than ever. You go to certain places in Connecticut, don't see a white person, and you go to certain places in Connecticut and you don't see a black person. We're segregated. We have no awareness until we come to college, and it's UConn's responsibility to make sure that all students leave more aware than they come in. And this is the way to do it. We often see racial incidents happen on campus, and everyone says we don't want them to be expelled. We want a restorative practice instead. We want to educate them instead. This is the proactive way of educating these people so incidents don't happen. It's not the only solution, but education is definitely one of the best solutions. Everyone wants people to be educated and not punished, and this is the perfect way to do it, and this is what they proposed. I think it's a beautiful legislation, a beautiful idea. Every class we take from elementary school to college is usually off of white America or off of the white world. I mean, we're taught from this white European perspective. And I think forcing people to take classes that are taught from a different perspective are really going to widen people's scopes. And that's what college is meant for. So thank you.
Thank you. Christine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat everything that Neha said because I'm pretty sure she emphasized that enough, but I can't speak on how proud I am of Katie, B, Mason, Irene, everyone that authored this legislation. I know how much work this took, and I can't thank you guys enough. When we say we want change within our communities, this is what we're looking for. And I think this is a great step in the right direction. Like Mason said, this does not solve every issue, but we come to college to get educated. We are all coming from so many different diverse backgrounds and identities, and this will only help us. I know adults love to use the phrase when you enter the real world, and this will only help us just have a better cultural awareness and just sensitivity to other issues that may not directly impact us, but we will be aware of them. So thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart. This makes me really happy, and I can't wait to see. I hope this gets passed. I am so proud of you all. So thank you.
Damani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to echo some of the sentiments from before, and also kind of share a bit of a personal story. I went to a middle school in West Hartford, where West Hartford is roughly 6% black, and I'm assuming anecdotally that would make it 94% white. The my educational experience through middle school was, to me, strange. You know, it felt a little out of place. My high school, I went to high school with two of the senators in the room now, is a magnet school. So it pulls from all over the state, and the diversity and the mixing of people was something that I found foundational. Just such an incredible experience. I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to go there, and you know, and to meet people who didn't look like me, but also to meet other students who did, which was not an experience that I had up to that point. I think that, you know, I was lucky enough that my mom is a educator in CREC, so she knew about magnet schools and could pull me personally into one. But I know that, you know, I'm privileged in that regard, and that not everyone is going to get an opportunity before college to have that kind of educational experience that I had. So I think that once they are here, providing that opportunity for that primer via whether it be that one credit or those the new content area 4, so that people can have a background and context with, you know, how to interact with a type of person that they, you know, never had to before. No, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I love that, Damani.
Let's go, Crack.
Craig's the best.
All right, thank you. Mike.
All right. Yes. So, yeah, thank you everyone for your work on this. We can tell it was a lot of work. So congratulations on getting this accomplished. I just have a few questions about, you know, what, you know, this is trying to accomplish, because when we talk about racism, it's a very broad issue. So I just wanted to learn a little bit more about what this is specifically trying to accomplish from a pedagogic, you know, approach, because we know that a lot of issues of racism are so beyond education. I mean, it was even mentioned in today's discourse that some people don't even interact with people, you know, in BIPOC communities, and that's the result of, you know, other areas where we could focus, like zoning laws. That's huge. That plays a huge role in where you go to school and who you interact with. So I'm just wondering, you know, what the focus of this effort is to, you know, to eliminate racism. And, you know, sort of like, you know, if we have an understanding of the scope too, because there's only so much we can address. So I just wanted to know that.
So I'm gonna turn it over, Luis, if that's okay. I'm gonna turn it over to Mason to talk about the race relations in America specific course, and then I'm gonna turn it over to B to talk about the intersectional component. So you both can go ahead on that.
I was about to go yield to Mason since I saw he was an alternate and he had his hand raised, so feel free to go ahead.
Thank you so much, guys. Okay, so number one, I disagree with the sentiment that education, that racism can't be dealt with education. And I think even in what you just said right there, people don't know if they don't come into contact with anybody. You have no idea what somebody's like or how to deal with somebody if you don't come into contact with it. So, and then secondly, to add on to that, we alone with this, like we said before, are not eliminating racism with this. And I would ask anybody who speaks about this not to characterize it as such, because it puts the burden, number one, on us to eradicate racism at UConn, and number two, it places an undue burden on us more so than the administration to solve this issue. So I would steer clear of that if I was anybody trying to characterize this. The goal of this is to make sure that people are educated on other people's culture, plain and simple. It's to make sure that people are engaging with, even if it's something that they don't understand or don't agree with, they're actually getting that information. I can recall a time when I was in high school and I was in a Christian ethics class, and we had three different units. One was talking about environmentalism, one was talking about racism, and one was talking about gender. And as a sophomore, environmentalism and racism were easy for me. And then we got to gender, and I was confused, and some things didn't make sense, and I had to do some soul searching to be able to understand that. But I would have never really come into contact. I wouldn't have been a Wiggs major right now. I mean, minor right now, excuse me, if I didn't come into contact with education on gender and on the pink tax and all the things that women go through. And so for some people, if we don't present them with this educational course, they're not going to come into contact with anything that would tell them about different people's culture, about how to interact with people and how to engage with people. This is to make sure that people are at least very much aware that people are different from you, and things that may be cool with you and your specific ethnic group are not understood and are not culturally acceptable somewhere else, and are not, are disrespectful to some people. It's just to make sure that people have the education and the awareness. And, with this, the goal is to not change everybody and make everybody see things the way that we do. The only goal is to make sure that everybody is accepted here, is respected here, and has the ability to say something and be heard. And that's pretty much what we're trying to do. In relation to the race relations course, the goal behind that is, again, this is one of the most racially disproportionate states in the nation, and I'm sure that you guys all know that. And there's people here, again, that have never come into contact with anybody that doesn't look like them. I've literally been told by people that you are the first Black person I have ever had a class with, the first Black person I've ever spoken to beyond a sporting game, things of that nature. And being a Black student, being a Muslim student, being a Hispanic student, these are things that, that are very important for people to understand and people to know. And if, we this may be the only time we get the opportunity to get into somebody's head about this. This may be the only time that we can get somebody to mandate that somebody knows about this, because our lives are subjective. We do with them what we want. And there's plenty of people that don't want to be involved in this conversation, don't want to talk about race, want to steer away from this. And if we give people that option, we're doing a disservice to what we're trying to do here. So yeah, and B, you could go right ahead.
Absolutely. I would just like to emphasize everything that Mason said. And with the intersectional perspective, I think when we talk about social injustices, that conversation can't be held without the basis of education or addressing principles within that. In order to have that conversation, there needs to be some sort of education. And if there isn't, that obviously means that there is a need for some sort. So given that context, I find this to be extremely important. And Mike, while I appreciate your questions, of course, as always, I think though that the bigger picture is more of just like what my question to you would be, what would the necessary, I don't know, like what would the harm or potential cons of this be? Like I understand your question, but I guess my question is, well, hypothetically, if we couldn't eradicate racism, which is because like we can't do that, like Mason and I and Katie and I, we can't do that. Mason being a Black man and me being a Latina woman, like that's a lot of weight to carry. Like that's just something that's not achievable, especially being two college students on a whole entire campus. So given that context, like what Mason said, that's while that's always the goal to strive for, we understand that that's not possible. So what I have to say with the intersectional component is that I think bringing conversation to the classroom is the biggest step, especially because a lot of folks have preconceived notions, especially being so isolated from certain ethnic groups or et cetera, whether that's gender, sexuality, race, whatever it is. And with those preconceived notions comes ignorance and comes microaggressions and comes this whole cycle of oppression that could lead to other things as well. With that, like I said, I highly emphasize the idea of having a conversation and starting that with education, because I feel like that's the root of everything. A lot of folks do have great intentions, and I think sometimes just a conversation could really change a lot of things. And I know that there's been a lot of folks who have taken this UNIF anti-Black racism class who have loved every second of it because they're like, wow, I've never been exposed to any of these components or concepts before. Like, this has really changed my mind. And while I appreciate your question, I just would like to emphasize that here at USG today, I've noticed that I'm always down to answer questions, but I would like for folks to look at the more broader aspect of things. And while I'm always down to answer questions, I think it's important to frame how we ask our questions because we don't necessarily want to negate from the actual issue or topic. Because while there may be certain specifics that folks may be asking, the bigger picture, excuse me, is extremely more important than one minor aspect of that. As I said, that I don't believe if you do so that there is any cons to this potentially. And I'm not saying that you do believe that there is cons, but I think that if there isn't, discussion shouldn't necessarily be held to this extent, given that it should just be something that is already passed. Thank you.
Thank you all for those comments. I kind of in the future would like to keep the question section to the question section. So I'm going to avoid from allowing for this question and answer dialogue for the remainder of this discussion. Just for the sake of everyone's time, I know we've already been here for 2 hours. I would like to get us out of here within the next hour, but I also want to afford this conversation the right level of respect and also allow as many voices to be heard on it as possible. So with that, I will now yield to Mason. Oh no, wait, Mason, you just spoke on that point. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go to someone else. I'm going to go to Mitchell.
I mean, mine also kind of had like a question inside it. I was about to go away with my hand, but I just want to speak and say that I think this is an extremely awesome. I'm not going to speak over what everyone has already said, but I think this is an awesome, super important issue to attempt to address. Obviously, racism isn't going to be solved through one bill or anything like that. But I guess my kind of question is for you guys that created, I know I'm trying to avoid a question, but real quick, that created this is, do we anticipate, and I don't know myself speaking as a white man, and I haven't, unfortunately, I wasn't able to put this course into my schedule this semester because it was already full and I couldn't go over the limit. But do we anticipate folks that may have experienced obviously racism in their lives being triggered by being required to take this course? And have we thought about if some folks, maybe if they have extreme incidents, they're like, look, we can't do this. Like, is there going to be an option for folks, or do we not anticipate that? Or what do you guys think?
So on this point, I'm going to yield to one author as opposed to three. So Mason, since you have your hand up, unless any of the other authors feel more confident answering it, Mason, please answer.
I appreciate it, Luis. Thank you. I think we did think about that. And I mean, I could say unequivocally that almost every person of color I know has experienced something like this. And every time we talk about it, it's triggering. But I think all of us collectively understand that this is something that has to be talked about. It doesn't change if we don't talk about it. You know, it's the same thing with every other thing that's an issue here, whether it's, you know, it's sexual assault or whether it's anti-Semitism. If we don't engage the topic, it's not going to alter it. So I think we did think about that, and we've understood, like, yeah, this is an uncomfortable thing to talk about. Being here and having these conversations and not knowing really what people are asking, what people are saying is uncomfortable. And that's the point. You know, this is not something that's going to be all roses and we're going to love it and it's going to feel really good. This is stuff that we're engaging that sucks, that really sucks to engage with. But we know that 5 years ago, we didn't engage with it. 10, 15 years ago, our parents didn't engage with this in college. So the onus is on us now to present this. And I mean, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. And there's going to be people in here that, you know, are going to feel uncomfortable being white and understanding that this is what has been created and perpetuated by the systems that were created by white people in America. Doesn't make you, you know, it doesn't make you a creator of it. It just makes you a beneficiary of it. And the question is, what are we going to do about it now? When you're Black or Hispanic or Native or Asian and you see these things and you're engaging with this, you know, you're going to have to, you know, think about things that have happened to you. But that's the nature of this. And it's about, you know, how do we bring people together? We're not trying to separate people. We're not trying to, you know, to argue about these things. We're just trying to get people to understand what's going on. If we could get people in here that at the very basic level understand, you don't walk up to a Black person and touch their hair we've solved our job. We've solved something, right? And that's the goal here. So we've absolutely thought about it. Thank you for asking that. We've thought about it. But I think we, as well as all the students that have asked for this, understand that this is something, if we're going to want to change it, we're going to have to talk about it.
Thank you to Mason and Mitchell for that line of discussion. I'd like to go to Lakita next.
I have my hand down.
Never mind. Your hand literally went down as I said that. So now let's move on to someone else. Nidhi, yes, sorry. I'm truly sorry for mispronouncing your name every time.
Okay, it's just Nidhi. I just wanted to I think that this took a lot of work, and I think that it's great. Mason and B and Katie spent so much time doing this. It's really amazing. But I did want to inquire that as members of USG, our duty is to represent the what students at UConn value in their education and what students at UConn will potentially want in their 4 years here. And as far as I've had, in terms of the data that I've looked at, and in terms of the conversations that I've had with other students at UConn, regardless of race or culture or whatever, it seems that additional gen eds and additional constriction of educational freedom when people enter university is more of a con than a pro. And it's something that a lot of people are relatively against. Of course, I think it would be a good line of discussion or thought if USG put in some work into realizing how students really feel about additional gen ed requirements, about shifting their education in a pretty short period of time. And also another point that I would like to add is, in addition to what Mitchell said, I think what he was referencing to is how people of color would potentially feel in these classes were it to be mandatory. I know that this semester almost 700 students joined the anti-racism course, and I'm wondering if we didn't keep it mandatory, if the number of students would remain the same, or if people would want to still attend these courses without having the university mandated on people who might not want to discuss these issues as people of color themselves, who have endured really tough subjects like sexual violence, police violence, etc. So that's just something that I wanted to add to the discussion.
If I could respond to this directly, please. This is something that, again, we've considered, and we've discussed, and specifically in regards to the change in the academic course plan. I think when you survey a predominantly white institution where Black people are 7%, Hispanics are 11%, Native people are even less than 1%, the majority of students are not going to want to engage with this topic. So I don't think that's an accurate representation of who actually wants to take these. And I think it's also not something that should stifle us trying to pass this. Because this is something, again, nobody really wants to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I talk about this every single day and every time I approach something. I absolutely understand how a couple of students feel about it. I understand that students don't want to talk about this. But this is something that has gone on for way too long. This is something that has affected students of color for way too long. We have conversations with alumni that come back and say, UConn was a terrible place for me mentally. I don't want to come back. I didn't even want to come back to help people who are in the same position because I was not supported and I was not represented, right? So in this course, in these recommendations, we're making it so that people actually have the topics that they want to be brought to the forefront, which multiple students and multiple student organizations have told us that this is what students of color want. And this is what other non-BIPOC students want. If this is what they want to have happen, this is what's going to happen. In relation to the academic course plan, we're not taking this. I disagree with the sentiment that we're taking this sharp turn and we're changing the academic course plan and it restricts students' academic freedom. All we do is specify and get more specific in terms of course area 4, and we add a 1-credit class. That's a UNIF class. That's not a class that's going to shift anybody's GPA. That's not going to take any focus away from anybody's core class subjects. I understand it. And if we're gonna nitpick and we're gonna micromanage with this specific topic, I would ask USG, when are we going to pass something like this? If this is always going to be the question of, this is an impediment to my academic course plan, this is something that nobody want to talk about, when are we going to talk about this? That's what I'd like to know.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to Neha, and then I want to make a quick point on discussion before we continue, because I see there are many hands, and I want to give everyone the opportunity to speak, but I also want everyone to be mindful of the time. Neha, go ahead.
I'm gonna keep this really, really brief. I feel like I have a lot of thoughts. Education is not the only answer, but it is definitely an answer, and I want everyone to keep that in mind. If you're educated about a topic, you're less likely to be biased. You're just being exposed, and exposure is the way to end racism. That's the reason we have racism, is because people are not exposed to people with different different upbringings and identities than them. And also, I want to address the top of this legislation that says two statements made by UConn students that they wanted this. And yes, they were BIPOC students, and yes, BIPOC students are only 41% of our campus, so you won't see it from 100% of the students, but those 41% of BIPOC students are really trying their best to push this. And we have to listen to them because that's still a portion that's honestly been unheard for so long, so I think we should prioritize in their voices. I'm talking to a senior who wants to come to UConn. She's a Black woman, and she told me, she said, I don't want to go to UConn. It's a PWI. It's racist. I keep hearing that it's racist. I saw Black at UConn. It's racist. I'm not going to go to UConn. We are the undergraduate student government. We have connection with the student body and with admin. And if our university looks racist, we need to do everything possible to make it less racist, and if not, anti-racist. And this is a way to be anti-racist. This is a way for students to leave more aware and exposed to different identities and ways of living. I'm an FYE mentor, and I was talking to one of my mentees. She's a white woman. She said I can share this. She is in the anti-racism, Black racism course, and she literally knew nothing about race before coming to UConn. She said in summer it was her first time going to the Black Lives Matter march, and honestly, it was because her friends were going. And she didn't know about Trayvon Martin. She didn't know about the LA with the start in the 90s when this movement started. Everyone just heard about it with George Floyd, which is great. I'm happy it's being exposed. This has been happening for decades. But this woman, she said, I know nothing. I went to a march and I just signed up for this class because, I don't know, it seemed cool. It was easy. It was one credit. And now she's talking to me saying it is the best class she has ever taken in her life because she is now more educated and wants to go to UConn to educate herself more. She's asking me to get involved, how she can advocate for people of color. That is the purpose of this class, and it is doing its purpose, and I can see it through her story. And I'm so beyond happy that we pushed for this and we can see that change. And I'm so ready to see that change across all of UConn. It's needed. It needs to happen. And I'm really proud of her. I'm proud of all the people putting this through, and proud of all the people changing their perspectives, because that's what's needed. I was going to say a lot more, but I don't want to ramble too long. I just hope that helped share it. And people do want this, and people are enjoying this. It is the most enrolled class at UConn right now. Over 500 students are enrolled into it. I want to emphasize that people want this. People need this.
Thank you, Neha. I'm going to outline what is going to happen for the remainder of discussion on this motion. So while I appreciate feedback from the authors, I think that it's made the discussion last quite a long time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all points of discussion and then give the authors, all four of them if they'd like, an opportunity to say what they will before we vote. Just because I feel like the back and forth, while productive, also takes a lot of time. And I'd like a slightly more expeditious route to voting on this piece of legislation tonight. So I will not be recognizing any of the authors to speak, with exception to an extreme circumstance until until right before we enter into a vote. And I encourage them all to take that time to speak once we get there. So with that, I'm going to be going straight down my list. If you have already spoken, please check, and if you do not need to speak, please lower your hand at this time. If you feel like your point has been covered sufficiently, please lower your hand. I'm going to go in an order that it is on my screen, which is more often than not the order in which people raise their hands, just for complete clarity. The next speaker here is Ben Gladstone.
The legislation says that the phrase "All Lives Matter" is racist when it's a slogan supported by the Black U.S. Senator Tim Scott and the Black Cabinet Secretary Ben Carson.
Thank you, Ben. Nidhi.
Oh, I accidentally raised my hand, I think. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Nidhi. Sarah.
Okay, cool. 2 points. To the worry that this would make students' academic lives more difficult by placing another gen ed requirement on it. for currently enrolled students, this will not affect them at all. Like, for example, there's like now an environmental literacy credit requirement thing that I was already a student here when that was passed. So that does not affect me at all. I do not have to take. So this would, I think, affect incoming students. So it doesn't place an added burden on anyone. And speaking from the perspective of my own constituents, I'm a College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources senator. And especially in my own major, we're really working to try and make it, to try and have a focus on intersectional environmentalism and acknowledge how BIPOC community members are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. And to do that, we cannot effectively do it with the current general education requirements that we have. I think I'm in full support of this, and I completely am very proud of and thankful for the authors.
Thank you, Sarah. Lakita.
So this is just going to be a personal statement for me, but for any of you who weren't aware, I used to be a tour guide for the School of Engineering for my freshman and sophomore year, and I would gladly show that, UConn is the place to come. It is the place where like things are great, studies are, nice, professors are encouraging of students. There is diversity. I no longer give tours because I can't lie to another female student or a BIPOC student and say that UConn is fully diverse and inclusive and fully supports its students. And that's just all that I want to say on this.
Thank you, Lakita. Mike.
Thank you for recognizing me. So as you know, as in my function as the president of the student body, and again, I bring this figure back to the Senate to make sure we contextualize our role in the university. We represent 18,000 undergraduate students. So for this change, this is a major change that we're proposing to the university. I want to make sure we have the consent of the student body to do this. If we're going to add requirements to education, I'm not sure about the rest of you, but I take 6 to 7 classes per semester. And on top of that, I work, and now I'm doing USG. And that's to say that people on this call right now are very committed people. And, we're committed, but we also need to take care of each other. And we need to make sure that we're not overextending ourselves. So we need to make sure we have the consent of the student body. There was also a comment about UConn being predominantly a white campus. And perhaps because of that, there might not be a willingness to to take an anti-racist education. And, I'm not sure if that comment is particularly appropriate because we should not be making assumptions about any community. So I wanted to make sure that was said. And also, there's a lot of support for the course that's been offered, the one that has over 700 students. That's amazing. That really, to me, is amazing. That warms my heart to hear that there is organic support on this campus to change, to get educated. So, if there's this tremendous organic support, why aren't we taking advantage of it? So I'm just concerned about, making sure we have the consent of the student body to do something this big, which is to make a statement on behalf of the student body that we want this. And on top of that, the comments made about the campus community and the organic support. So I just wanted to make those 3 points. Thank you.
So a note before I recognize the next speaker, I'm going to cap the speakers list here. After these speakers are finished, I will refer to the authors, and then we will debate on this matter and take a vote. I hope that's fair. I want to be as fair as possible, but we also have more things than just this. So next on the speakers list is Christine.
Hi, everyone. I know I spoke earlier, so I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time, but I just wanted to speak more so on my own perspective. I know I am student development director, and I have a duty to the cultures and identities that represent our campus as well. But personally, for me, I am a Latinx identifying woman, so the issues that are being talked about within the social, societal, cultural awareness, educational and general requirement would be impacting to me as well. I am also a human rights major, so the issues that are being brought up in my everyday classes that I take every single day are directly impacted by the issues that happen in our global society. So I don't necessarily get a break from talking about issues that are harmful to my community, but I also think that we have a duty as BIPOC students to keep this movement sustainable. If yes, we need to take time for ourselves, give ourselves self-care, make sure that we take time to recover. But this is an issue that we can't just stop, and we can't just let it sit to the side. I think now more than ever, we need to speak upon these issues. And I don't think it's fair that we frame this as a majority of students and asking the consent for everyone's opinions, because majority of USG legislation that is passed is through our Senate body. Currently, we only have 39 senators in this call right now, and yet we have so many decisions that are impacting our community at large. So I don't think that that's necessarily a fair assumption to make. I think this is only going to be able to push us in the right direction. The only actual fundamental change that this will make to a student's career at UConn is 1 credit. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we have Chief Diversity Officer Douglas, or Damani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a few things that I want to touch on. The first is that we are the students' elected representatives, right? We all campaigned and asked the students to give us permission to make decisions with their money on their behalf, right? All of those things are things we campaigned on. We campaigned on doing this, doing that, doing some other thing. So the idea that we can't make a recommendation on their behalf without, waiting and surveying all 18,000 of them, to me seems out of line with the idea of a representative, which we all are. The second thing that I would just like to encourage generally is, as we're talking about this legislation specifically and some of the other pieces, that we all take a moment to read all the way through the legislation. The number of times, and listen when our peers are talking, the number of times that I heard the question asked, will this add course requirements, was kind of ridiculous. And I say that acknowledging that off the bat, Katie addressed that immediately, right? And then I heard Mason and B both address it multiple times. So I think as we're looking at this and other legislation, we have to remember that A, we are the students' representatives, and B, if we want to talk about the details in the legislation, we owe it to the authors and each other. The time is almost 9 o'clock here, to actually do the reading ahead of time, right? If we're going to do the nitpicking, we had at least do the homework. I'll yield.
Thank you, Damani. Next, we have Abby.
Yeah, I just wanted to put this in perspective a little bit. I think Damani and Christine both touched on it a little bit, but honestly, what is it, a 1 credit course? So that's like an hour of our time for a couple weeks out of our lives. What is that amount of time to make, 41% of students feel safer on campus? This is an issue of safety. It's an issue of making students feel accepted. So I don't feel like it's productive to argue that this isn't a good use of our time. Like, people's safety and people feeling like they belong here is a productive use of our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. The final speaker before I refer to the authors for one last round of comments is Will. Chad.
Thank you, Luis. Mostly just a retweet to what Damani said. I really want to emphasize that we are the elected representatives of the student body. So the point that we should be consulting them doesn't make sense to me. But beyond that, Damani nailed it. So yeah, he did a good job. Actually, I'm gonna take my hand down. Thanks, Luis.
Thank you. Mason, B, or Kate, or Irene, if any of you would like to make a final statement before we move into a vote, now is the time to do so.
Really quick, like to address a couple of things. First of all, I don't remember which senator it was. We seem to have glossed over it, but I don't know what senator it was. It may have been Ben Gladstone. But somebody said, Senator Tim Scott said, the use of all lives matter is not racist. First of all, don't have to say I was offended, because I was. It's a phrase that's been touted by white supremacists and has been touted by far-right groups that have made it their active mission to persecute Black and brown bodies. And I will not accept somebody tokenizing somebody saying, one Black person saying it as, you know, as a use to, you know, to state that it's not racist, because we know it's racist. And just because one Black person said it doesn't mean it doesn't. So I was offended by that statement, and whoever said it, if you'd like to address it with me, I'd like to address it with you. Secondly, I would say again, to echo everybody else's point, you know, this is something, we're not asking for an arm and a leg. We're asking for an hour of your time, literally probably once a week, to study something and to engage with material that will make me and everybody else I represent feel more safe, more secure, and more represented in a place that we don't have representation. To Michael's point, when Michael Hernandez, when you said I was characterizing a certain group feeling a certain way about something, I was not. It is a fact that we go to a predominantly white institution. It is a fact that most of the students that oppose this are not of color. It's not. I'm not making a judgment. I'm not making an insinuation. It's a stated fact, and I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. And this entire meeting today, I hope you all think back and see that this is indicative of exactly where we're trying to go. To Damani's point, Brittany said it already. We went through the work of creating and drafting this legislation. If we were going to address it now, I would have hoped that you would all have at least had read it prior, and we could have addressed some of the questions that you had. But many of you, by the questions you asked, showed that you didn't. And I'm disappointed in a lot of you personally. But I would like to say that, you know, I hope that at some point you see the importance of this. And at some point you see that asking for one credit course and asking to restructure a very broad content area to make it more specific and to engage more critically with material that will protect and serve everybody would be more clear to you all. And I thank you for the people that have supported this. And, you know, it's not easy, I understand, to be in USG and to represent us in this capacity. So for everybody that spoke up on our behalf, I thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Mason. B or Katie, my bad. Would you like to speak?
B, if you want to go first, that's fine. I can go after you.
Yeah, definitely. I would just like to add briefly everything that Mason said. I would also like to state, as everyone else has stated, just very briefly, like I stated in the beginning of this meeting, it is very important that you review everything that you're looking over. As someone who's not a part of USG, I'm a bit disappointed because I feel like I come in with that expectation, you know, you guys looking over, not all of you, but you guys looking over this stuff and studying it. So when there's questions being asked that is so micro focused on one part, I'm okay with questions, regardless of what the question is, but it's this constant pattern that some of these questions are in a way forming into a form of gaslighting, where it's negating from the fact of the actual issue. I don't see any con with this proposal whatsoever. I understand the questions and I take them into consideration wholeheartedly, and I'm down to talk to anyone else about it personally. My concern is, what are all these questions about if there's not a major con, if there's not a major negative to this? Why isn't it already being passed? What is the problem with a one credit course? It's not adding a minor, it's not adding a major, it's not rocket science. I'm genuinely confused, and I would just like to say, Mason being the president of NAACP and me being the president of UCO, I find it a bit concerning how USG in the past has wanted to use both of these organizations to tokenize us to represent diversity, yet when we present the actual diversity and inclusion you guys claim to want, that's not wanted, or as it at least comes across in this meeting. So I would just appreciate for this organization, not everyone here, but for those people who want us to be a part of the conversation yet don't really want to do the work, that's very concerning. And going forward, that's just something that I'm going to have to take very seriously, because I'm not going to sit and try to represent USG in a manner for something that they're only going to want to tokenize us with and not actually address the real issue, because that's just the utmost disrespect, in all honesty. So I'm extremely disappointed. I still have love and care for all of you, but I just expected more tonight.
Irene, you and Kate can determine, or Kate, you and Irene can determine the order.
Irene,
you go
first. No, you can go first. You go ahead.
Okay, love you, Katie. I just want to keep this brief. I think the fact that we're having this conversation for so long is indicative of why we need this legislation in the first place. It is absolutely disappointing to me and to I think most people on this call that we even need to debate the fact that we're proposing a 1 credit addition, and that seems to be problematic. I'm taking 19 credits this semester, and I will gladly take an additional 1 credit if it means proposing a class that will introduce students to the basics of human rights. And if we have a problem with introducing students to the basics of human rights, and that is something very deeply, structurally, fundamentally problematic with this organization, we need to look into ourselves and consider why that's there and what we can do from an academic standpoint, perhaps through legislation such as this one, to address that. And that's all I'll leave it at, and I'll turn this over to Katie.
Okay, friends, so I'm gonna try to keep this as short as possible with giving the attention that it deserves. I want to remind you, B and Mason, how valid you both are. You know, the first thing that I did when I saw both of those comments on September 14th, 2020 was contact both of you. I know that USG has a history of leaving out those organizations that really do this work, and I didn't want to present something without having both of your organizations' support on it, because it just wouldn't be legit if it didn't have your support. So I thank you for all of the work. I acknowledge that it's been, emotionally exhausting on the both of you. And I want to make it clear that throughout this process, I've had to apologize to B and Mason on behalf of USG more than I probably should have to. I think that we have a lot of work to do to become a better organization. And, I said this to our executive board. I will say it here we saw USG implode in the beginning of July. We are no different from the beginning of July. I would just like to remind us all of that. I would also like to make it clear that I've heard this from administration twice. First, the provost mentioned it at the NAACP town hall, and Tomcat mentioned it at the end of the anti-Black racism course that I also took. The university is already looking into specifically how to incorporate the anti-Black racism 1 credit course on a larger scale, and they're already looking at what to do with general education requirements to fix what we have. They can do it without us, but I want them to do it with us because I don't trust them. Just gonna say that. I know this is recording. I don't care. I don't trust them. I want us to be in the room when that happens. I want us to adequately represent. I have concerns with the University Senate. They're being brought up at a different time, but students need to be in the room. That's it. And if we don't vote on this, students aren't going to be in the room. They're going to go out, they're going to go without us. And all of this work, we did all of this work. We answered all of your questions. I just hope you vote the right way and with your head. So that's all I have to say.
As I've said a couple of times, this is the cap on debate. I'm opening the poll now. This is the final. We're doing the debate. We're doing it now. The poll is open. This motion is passed. Well over 50% of the room has voted in favor of it. I will announce more specific totals as I have them in a minute and 30 seconds. For now, we will introduce the withdrawal legislation. The author is welcome to do so at this time.
Hi guys, I genuinely did not think we were going to be here for so long. I'm going to try to be cognizant of time. For those of you who don't know, my name is Janana, and this is my first year as a USG Senator as well as a USG representative on the Scholastic Standards Committee. First, I wanted to thank everyone who read or sponsored this legislation. I do want to acknowledge that I'm still frustrated about Pass Bill, especially since I was a student representative on the committee overseeing this matter. For anyone who is still unaware, it failed to pass in University Senate. It was difficult being the only person advocating for Pass Bill on multiple occasions, writing a bunch of emails and receiving a lot of backlash, as well as some insensitive and frankly ignorant comments. I was definitely disappointed to see that even the other student representative on this committee accepted the admin side and was against pass-fail grading choice. Going forward, I want to see a push for more student representatives in University Senate, along with an established connection between student reps and USG so that student opinions are accurately represented. I'm genuinely still processing all this. I also want to take the time to thank everyone involved in Pass-Fail. Katie's efforts when drafting the student survey and compiling the opinions of 1,000 students were outstanding. And Lakita spent hours writing legislation and making a presentation for the Senate floor. I'm also grateful for all of the student senators who spoke out in favor of Pass-Fail. We had a 58% majority. It just wasn't enough for a 2/3 majority. With that being said, I'm not confident that if Pass-Fail was brought up for a third time, it would pass in Senate, especially since there's only one Senate left before the term ends. Instead, I want to push for an extension of the withdrawal deadline and make it so that any W for this term is taken off your transcripts if you so choose. I don't think a formal appeal process for these W's is necessary because we all know that students are struggling in various extenuating ways during this pandemic. But please let me know if you have any questions or concerns regarding this legislation. I'd love to hear what everyone has to say. I'm also new to legislation, and I don't know if I'm supposed to read this out.
No, you're fine. Just if you would generally go over the points that it accomplishes and what it's intended to do.
All right, sound good. Basically, it's trying to say that students are struggling with online learning during the pandemic, and we don't really have any alternative regarding academic policies since Pass-Fail failed to pass, and the Pass-Fail policy that we currently have only allows electives to be placed on Pass-Fail, and it doesn't allow us to transfer them to different institutions, or it's not acceptable when a student changes majors or schools. It also mentions how freshmen are struggling in this transition to college, and they haven't properly been informed of their academic resources. And the University Senate was responsible for conveying an academic toolkit, which they haven't done as of yet. And they plan to do in the next coming weeks, but that's too late for the end of the term. Moreover, the withdrawal deadline passed on November 2nd, and we don't have any alternative academic policy in place to support students. So as the undergraduate student government, I think that we should support students and push University Senate to extend the withdrawal deadline and allow students the option to choose whether or not these W's show up on their transcripts, because usually there is an appeal process for the W's not being on transcripts. But I think that based on the extenuating circumstances that everyone has during these harsh times, I don't think this appeal process is necessary.
Thank you for presenting. Before we continue with discussion on this legislation, I'd like to make it known that on the previous vote on the course requirement, in a vote of 23 to 1 to 1, this overwhelmingly passes the Senate. So congratulations to the authors and all those who put work into it. We will now continue discussion on the withdrawal legislation at hand. Are there any questions for the author of this legislation at this time? Chris, I see your hand up. Is that for a question or a point of discussion?
I left it up from last one by accident, but I can ask a question for this one too.
Go for it.
So, a concern that I've heard from like many students, especially in the School of Engineering, is that the pass-fail grading system kind of caused a little bit of grading inflation last semester, which was understandable because last semester students had signed up for classes and then halfway through they had the classes change, the syllabuses change. So they really didn't know what they were getting into when they went in, but that's kind of like a different situation for this semester. Everyone kind of knew going into this semester what it would be like, and they were kind of agreeing to that by enrolling. So I was wondering what your take is on the kind of grade inflation issue.
Oh, sorry. Did someone else want to talk?
Go for it first, Janana.
Oh no, you can go first.
I was just gonna say, while I do want to answer that question, I don't think it's appropriate considering that this piece of legislation focuses on the withdrawal, not in regards to grade inflation or pass fail, which isn't the whole point of this piece of legislation. So if we can leave that off till discussion or discuss it at a later time, I think that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Lakita. Whether or not, yeah, let's discuss that at a later time.
All right. Are there any other further questions for the authors? Seeing none, we will move into discussion. Are there any points of discussion? Oh, Mitchell, if that's a question, feel free to go since I moved rather quickly. Mitchell, discuss or question, up to you.
Alrighty, yeah. It's a point of discussion, I suppose. I'm strongly in favor of this legislation. I would have to also strongly disagree with Chris. I mean, I am a new student to UConn, though, so I don't know exactly what happened with your school or anything like that, or like your specific school of, I think you said engineering or whatnot. But I mean, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. The United States is the hot spot, and like we don't know what's happening in other people's lives. Like family members might be dying left and right. You don't know, and so I think I was honestly really I wish I helped more. I apologize to anyone that was working on the pass fail stuff. I was just following it. I'm also a new senator and stuff, and I wish I got more involved with that. But I think pass fail. I think that should be going on as long as we have a pandemic. Honestly, that's my personal take. Like, yes, I understand, but we're also in a very unique situation. And I know this isn't about pass fail, so I just want to say, in the least, if we could extend those withdrawal dates for students that might be struggling for whatever reasons, it doesn't even matter. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, family members, economic struggles, like everything, and people, here we are trying to study and get our educations, and that's awesome and it's admirable. And even to be able to complete these courses at a time like this, I think is worth praise. And so it's unfortunate pass fail didn't occur, but I think at least trying to extend these withdrawal dates should be a focus here. And it's unfortunate that the University Senate didn't recognize the the situation that the world is in. But
thank you. I'd appreciate if we didn't focus on pass fail, seeing this is about withdrawals. Please try to focus on the content of the legislation, everyone. Becky.
I'm also in full support of this, and I hope that I don't know how long this discussion will go on for, but I just do urge everyone involved to be mindful of everyone's well-being in different circumstances, as Mitchell was starting to discuss. I think we are all unaware of each other's circumstances, and I think that we should just approach this with kindness and compassion and care. I'm disappointed in the gaslighting and invalidation that we've seen so far tonight, and I do not want to see that continue in this conversation. Think of your peers. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Ben Gladstone.
I propose expanding the W removal process to W's earned in the spring of 2020.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Could you repeat that one more time, Ben?
I propose amending the W removal process to allow for removal of W's earned in the spring of 2020.
You know, after reviewing that, I'm going to rule that as dilatory, seeing as that's not something that can be functionally done. The process for that has long ended. I'm sad to say. I believe action was taken on that in the past, but even if we advocated on behalf of that, the restrictions would not allow it. That is a battle that is unwinnable. So I'm just going to rule that out of order.
Can I actually speak something? Because I would actually
If I'm
disagree.
wrong, correct me. If I'm wrong,
Yeah,
correct me, and we can go for it.
I don't know if many. I currently have several health concerns due to which in the past I was recommended to have W's on my transcript. So currently I have 5, unfortunately. I recently found out that there is an appeal process to have those W's removed. Similarly as to how we appeal past the, I believe it's the 9th week of classes when you have a W removed that due to extenuating circumstances and this, and this, I would like to have a W removed. And this can be done up till the last day of classes. They let you do that. In addition to that, there is an appeal form that you can fill out during which you put the same extenuating circumstances and can have that W removed from your transcript. Now, this is not something that's publicly known. Like, if you try to find it on a UConn website, you can't. And I've called the registrar's office multiple times and I've been given different information each time. But I know it exists. And honestly, it should have been used in spring 2020 because the same extenuating circumstances for which we had no appeal process to have the W removed, we should have had the same option to have the W removed from your transcript. And so I can definitely see if we can advocate for that, but I really don't know how receptive they would be because I don't know how receptive they will be to this. But individual students, if they can try to reach out to their advisors and ask about this process, I'm sure that they can look into it and let individuals know what is the way to go.
All right, thank you, Lakita. I'm still going to rule it out of order because to my understanding, it's not possible to do that for the previous semester at this time. Lakita, if I'm absolutely wrong about that and this is something reasonable, please say so at this moment and we can actually consider this amendment.
I know it's reasonable for individuals to do it. I can't speak for a university policy as a whole. That would have to be something that the University Senate standing committees look into, is all that I can say.
Can I quickly butt in? I think that this isn't a battle that we should be having at this very moment. I will echo what Lakita said. It's possible, but they're not going to go for it right now. I don't think we need to go with the proposal. I hate to say this, but because we want something and we don't want nothing, we need to go with the proposal that they're most likely to accept. I rarely say that, but in this case, I'm saying that because students need something. Those 1,000 students who filled out that survey need something. And so I don't want to take the risk of the University Senate invalidating this proposal because we added something that's not entirely, I feel, needed at the very moment.
Okay.
Can I butt in too?
This is the last butting in that will be done.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to echo what Katie's saying because this was added last minute to Luis's agenda, the agenda for the Senate, because I'm meeting with my committee next week. And I don't think adding last semester's W's to this legislation will help our cause.
All right, thank you all. I've ruled it out of order. I will allow 2 more speakers and then we're voting on this legislation. So the 2 speakers will be Becky and Chris. Becky first.
Oh, sorry, my hand was still raised.
Wonderful. Then we just go to Chris.
I was just confused before. I'm sorry. So can I just get some clarification? Is it currently that if you withdraw after November 2nd, that goes on your transcript as a W, or is it that you could remove the W before November 2nd?
So after the first 2 weeks of class, if you remove a class, you withdraw from a class, you have a W. What happens after the 9th week of class is that students can appeal at their individual departments to have to withdraw from a class if there are extenuating circumstances. You will have to get signatures from your advisor, from the department head, and from your professor, as well as provide documentation of said extenuating circumstances. That takes a little time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that is left to your individual schools and colleges.
Right now,
Okay.
there
Thank you.
is no like withdrawal. Like right now, like it passed on November 2nd. If you want to go and ask for a withdrawal, that's individual. Right now, there is no withdrawal.
To clarify, this would allow any student to withdraw without seeing their advisor until December 7th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is how it currently stands. I'm going to entertain no more debate on this particular legislation, and we will move into a vote. I'm going to move to forward it by unanimous consent. If there's an objection, we can go into the vote. Mainly because I don't have the poll set up, and if no one opposes, there's no sense in voting. Is there any objections to this piece of legislation? Seeing no objections, this legislation has been passed through the Student Senate. Thank you very much to the authors for their work. Yay. Sorry for my unenthusiastic yay. I'm rather tired. I am genuinely glad that we passed that. I realized how that can sound sarcastic after I did it. My bad. I've been requested to move the discussion of pass fail, so I'm going to move the discussion of pass fail to the Senate that we have the week after Thanksgiving break. I don't remember the exact date at this time, but that discussion will be moved. Lakita was the one who brought it to me, so she can speak briefly on why we're moving it at this point.
So, I just want to be cognizant of everyone's time, and considering that we've had a long Senate and honestly a emotionally taxing Senate, I didn't want to add the burden of this discussion at this time. However, I know that Chris did bring up a question earlier, and I do want to answer that before we end it. And if anyone has any questions or like wants to know more about what happened before the next Senate, like feel free to reach out to me. I will try to answer your questions as best I can. But Chris, would you mind repeating the question you asked earlier?
So I was just addressing some students' concerns that allowing pass or fail would cause some more grade inflation, like what was seen last semester, and they might not be recognized for their good for their hard work if they don't choose to put it on pass or fail. But we can discuss more about it next Senate. That's fine.
Okay. Sounds good. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure if you wanted to know now, I can speak to it as much as I can, but I thank you for waiting till next Senate to find out more about it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Next Senate, we will continue this discussion. Is there any other points of discussion? Seeing none, we are moving into announcements. Are there any announcements at this time? Damani.
Yeah, just a brief one. Some of you may have noticed in my report and in the below the signature of Luis's email, USG now has a incident reporting form that you can use to identify instances of bias or anything else that you think is behavior unbecoming of a member of USG. I just wanted to make you all aware of that. You will also see it at the bottom of all of the emails you get from a USG listserv.
Christine.
Hi everyone. I just quickly wanted to start off. Thank you everyone that has stuck around through the entirety of Senate tonight. Just echoing those sentiments. I know it's been a long and taxing one, so definitely make sure you take time for yourself after we close tonight. I just wanted to highlight our student development's collaboration with NACP. Our Cultural Appreciation Series event is tomorrow at 5 p.m. You can check out their Instagram for more information and the WebEx link. I think for some people, we all have a lot of work to do, clearly, some more than others, and I think this will be a great opportunity for us to just learn more about cultures and communities that we may not be representative of, and just begin that cultural awareness that we should all be striving for. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Are there any further announcements at this time? I have one, but I would like to hold it until the end. Seeing as there Neha, go for it.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm like parked up because I had to go pick up someone and I'm just waiting for them. But Thank you on behalf of everyone who presented a legislation today and it got passed. I'm so proud of all of you guys. I'm very new to legislation. I know how hard it can be, and a lot of people passed their first legislation ever today. So I'm really, really proud of all of you guys as parliamentarian for putting that work into learning how legislation works, into passing your first one today. I think there were 3 people who passed their first legislation today. So congratulations to you all. It's truly awesome to see on a positive note. But going back to that inclusiveness that kind of Christine was talking about, please focus on yourself. If you need an hour or 2 tonight and just not work and just to watch a movie or laugh a little, please do so. We need to make this activism sustainable, as Christine said earlier. We need to recharge and we need to work twice as hard if that's what we need to do. I'm here to listen to everyone. You guys can text me and we can set up a time. I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear what everyone has to say, but I really want to make sure that this stays and we increase this inclusivity in our environment here at student government. So that's what I'm working towards, and I'm willing to listen to everyone and anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. Any further announcements before I make mine? All right. My final announcement is twofold. First, we will be having an emergency Senate next week to appoint a number of people to various positions within, I think, student services, but I could be wrong. There are positions where the deadline for accepting applications was today, so it was not fitting to bring them to this Senate. In order to allow the committee to do work, we will be bringing them next Wednesday, where there will be a brief Senate with the sole purpose to approve those things at this point in time. On that front, we're not. Never mind. We may not be doing that then. So I expect an email from me with when that's definitive. Thank you for clarifying that to me, Becky. We extended the deadlines apparently, so that is incorrect. To continue on with my announcement, we will not be having an emergency Senate as of right now, but expect an email about caucus and perhaps the content of next week coming up. Further, I would like to thank all of you who took the time to sit here and have this discussion. While it was taxing on many of us, it was an important thing, and I believe that the results of all of the votes speak for themselves. I would like to take one more moment to emphasize that I am not the type of speaker who would like to kind of use speakers' discretion to set that limit on debate. That is not something that I personally enjoyed doing, but I felt was necessary considering the content of last week, and not something that I intend on doing going forward. I think that given USG's stance on the topic, the subject was addressed, and it was unnecessary to continue to do so at this time. I'm not apologizing by any means for doing it, but I'm saying that I will not do that unless I need to again in the future. Thank you all for staying. Thank you all for advocating. I apologize to those who are not in our organization if we've made you feel unwelcome. I know that the Senate is large and the Senate takes a long time. I hope that was not the intent of any senator here. We value your voices. I'm very glad your piece of legislation passed. I try to stay as unbiased as possible during the conversation to remain as fair as I can. But I was also saddened by some of the events during that discussion. So I wanted to express that, and I wanted to thank you all for staying with us and for putting the work in to make sure that we had that passed. That is the final announcement. Neha has her hand up. She can kind of finish off if she'd like.
Yeah, so next week is caucus. We're going to be doing an identity workshop mixed with some other things, but we're going to really be tackling into identity and intersectionality. I will be doing half of the presentation, and then Angel and MCD Senator will be doing the other half. So please come. We're just going to be opening up some discussions about this in some breakout rooms, and please be respectful, but I encourage everyone to come. It should be very empowering and educational.
Thank you all once more. I'm going to call to it at 9:33 p.m. Thank you. If you have any questions for me personally, I will be here for the next several minutes.
Thanks, Louise. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Louise?
Yes, Will?
I just want to say I think you did an excellent job tonight. things got a little bit rocky, and I think you handled it very well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolute 10 out of 10. Also, I love the new voting method. I like how good you are at it, because that is something I never figured out.
It took a little bit of trial and error, but we're there.
Yeah, and
Will struggled with WebEx. He did his best, but
literally shut up, Damani. What were the vote margins on the Coke one?
I can let me stop recording.